So dark is the night, with things that crawl around. Every tiny noise feels like a fight, clawing at your mind without a doubt. Footsteps echo wherever you are. It doesn't matter if they're near or far. A Scary Night by Yvette Coronado. Hundreds of years later, little Raine was tucked snugly into bed after her mother finished the bedtime story. Her curly, ink-black hair spilled over the white pillow, and her cherry-red lips parted in a soft yawn as her eyes fluttered, struggling to stay open. She wanted to keep listening to her mother's voice, but drowsiness wrapped around her like a warm blanket and pulled her under. Raine Tatum was an adorable 8-year-old girl, just 2 days away from turning 9. She could barely contain her excitement about the birthday party her mother and father had been planning. "Good night, Raine." Her mother kissed her forehead, then stood up, turned off the light, and walked out of the room. "Good night, Mommy," Raine murmured, cuddling her teddy bear close. Within seconds, she drifted into a deep sleep. The night was silent, too silent. An unnatural darkness pressed into the room, heavy and suffocating, like a fog that only she couldn't see. Raine stirred when something cold brushed against her leg. Half asleep, she lazily tried to kick it away, assuming it was just part of a dream. But then the grip tightened. Raine's eyes flew open. She looked down at her leg and saw eyes as red as blood staring back at her. A chill shot through her, freezing her in place. That thing with the red eyes was crawling up onto her bed. Where its mouth should have been was a hollow pit ringed with sharp, jagged teeth. Its icy hands slid from her legs toward her neck, fingers curling with the clear intention of strangling her. Its hot, foul breath washed over her face, and Raine went rigid with terror. In her shock, she couldn't even breathe, much less scream. Her body trembled uncontrollably. The air was squeezed from her lungs, leaving her choking and desperate. She didn't know what was happening. She only knew that the burning in her chest was getting worse. Her body jerked and convulsed as it began to give out. Raine kicked weakly at the creature, her efforts useless against its strength. Just as her vision began to blur and the edges turned black, the bedroom door slammed open. A man's harsh, raspy voice cut through the air. "Stop," he shouted. The red-eyed creature recoiled and released her throat. Raine collapsed onto the mattress, gasping and gulping down air like it was the sweetest thing in the world. Pain throbbed through her chest as she slid off the bed and hit the floor. "Mommy," she whispered, voice hoarse and trembling. "Mommy," she sobbed, but her small voice barely rose above a whisper. Slowly, Raine lifted her head to look at the man standing in the doorway. He wore a black sweater and ripped jeans, his long black hair tied to the nape of his neck. And his smile? His smile was vicious, stretching just enough to show off the elongated canines pushing over his gums. Raine gasped and broke into loud, panicked crying. "Shut up," he snarled. Her fear only made her cry harder. "Mommy, Mommy, shut up," he roared. His right hand smashed down on the top of her bedside drawer, splintering it into pieces. Raine sucked in a sharp breath and scrambled backward, scuttling under the bed on her hands and knees. She curled up there, shaking, trying to make herself as small as possible. "Shift," the man ordered the creature with the red eyes. "Turn back." With a low grunt, the creature's body convulsed and shifted. Its long, cold fingers shrank back into normal human hands. The hollow maw twisted and folded until it became lips, which curled into a smug smirk as its body reformed into a shirtless man. Only the blood-red eyes stayed the same. "Why did you stop me?" he asked casually, sitting down on the bed. The mattress dipped under his weight, making Raine flinch and let out a tiny shriek from beneath it. "She's the girl Lucifer has been searching for this past century." "How do you know it's her?" the man in the doorway asked, his eyes narrowing dangerously at the red-eyed man. "She could see me when I shifted." He shrugged. Ordinary humans weren't supposed to see shape-shifters in their altered form. Raine shouldn't have been able to see him at all, but she had. She had seen everything. The man at the door stroked his chin, his gaze sharpening. "We'll take her to Beelzebub. Alive." An eerie chuckle rolled out of the red-eyed man, the sound making the bed tremble. Raine whimpered under it. "Didn't you hear me, dead man?" he sneered. "I said I'll deliver her corpse to Lucifer. His hands began to morph again, stretching out into long fingers tipped with razor-sharp claws. Lowly shapeshifter, the man at the door muttered in a mocking tone. I found her first. I'm the one getting Beelzebub's bounty. The red-eyed man fully shifted as he roared. In that case, I'll make you taste a second death. He lunged forward, his slender body blurring as he threw himself at the other man. They crashed into each other, and the room exploded into chaos. Bones cracked, flesh hit walls, growls and roars overlapped, shaking the air. Raine hugged her knees to her chest under the bed, wrapping her arms tightly around them. She buried her face and squeezed her eyes shut, rocking as the sounds of violence thundered above her. The agonized screams of the red-eyed man only made her tremble harder. Finally, after a storm of snarls, curses, and growls, silence fell. Raine flinched when the mattress suddenly lifted. The man from the doorway hoisted the bed frame with one hand like it weighed nothing and peered down at her. Come here, you little brat, he panted. Beelzebub had better pay me well for this. He spat on the floor, right next to the lifeless body sprawled there. The red-eyed man lay dead, his blood spreading slowly across the floorboards in a dark, widening pool. The man's black sweater was torn to shreds, his long dark hair whipping behind him as he moved. Raine whimpered when his bloody hand grabbed the back of her pajamas and yanked her out of the room. He dragged her down the hallway, her heels scraping the floor. She screamed at the top of her lungs, calling for her mother and father, but no one answered. Impossible. He had just passed her parents' bedroom. They should have heard her, no matter how deeply they were sleeping. Raine cried harder and thrashed in his grip, desperate to escape. She dug her nails into his hand, but his skin felt like polished stone. She kicked at his legs, but he didn't even flinch, as if she were nothing more than a bothersome insect. Finally, she bit down on his hand as hard as she could. He stopped. He lifted her easily with one hand, dangling her in the air. Her attempt to escape had clearly irritated him. With a low growl, he hurled Raine toward the glass display cabinet where her father kept his miniature towers from all the places he had visited. The cabinet shattered the instant she collided with it. Glass exploded everywhere, and tiny shards sliced into her skin. Raine screamed in pain as she hit the floor. Broken glass glittered across the ground like cruel stars. Mommy, Daddy, she sobbed when the sharp edges cut her feet as she tried to stand. But her terror of the man in front of her silenced the pain. She stumbled backward, then turned and bolted toward the open doorway that led to the living room. As she ran, she caught sight of something on the floor. Two bodies. Blood seeped from open wounds, dark and thick against the floorboards. She knew them. Mommy! Daddy! Raine screamed, her voice cracking with horror. The scene was too much. Her legs gave out, and she collapsed, a piercing scream tearing out her chest. Her whole body shook, trembling so hard it hurt. She covered her eyes with her hands, but she could still feel him drawing near. A moment later, his hand closed around her and jerked her up from the floor. Raine shrieked as her body flew through the air and smashed against the wall. Pain exploded along her side and back, making her moan. But she wasn't the only one screaming. The man howled too, a raw, high-pitched cry full of rage and agony. Raine slowly lowered her hands from her face and forced herself to look at him. He was clutching his right hand, veins bulging along his skin, pulsing visibly. His twisted expression made it clear just how much pain he was in. Realizing this might be her only chance, Raine dragged her aching body toward the door that led to the front yard. I have to go to Uncle James. Uncle James will help. Clinging to that thought, she ignored the stabbing agony in her feet and ran as fast as she could. Faster, faster. She urged herself on as she stumbled over the threshold and onto the cold grass. Dew soaked her bare feet, making each step feel like she was running over a bed of needles, but she didn't dare stop. She was halfway across the yard, almost at the main gate, when something slammed into her back. She cried out as white-hot pain shot up her spine. His long, sharp nails dug into the skin of her shoulder. "Stop, or I'll kill you!" he yelled, his face inches from hers. But even his threat couldn't crush her instinct to survive. Raine twisted and struggled, fighting him with every bit of strength she had left. Her bleeding hand brushed against his bare upper arm. He screamed again, louder this time, and his grip loosened. Understanding crashed into her. She stared at her bloody hand, then at the contorted pain on his face. Her blood was hurting him. Without thinking twice, Raine pressed her bleeding palm hard against his bare chest. The moment their skin touched, he shrieked in agony. "Bitch!" he roared. Before he could hit her, Raine jerked herself free and scrambled away. She stumbled to her feet, flung the gate open, and sprinted toward Uncle James's house next door. The man didn't follow her. Raine didn't dare look back to find out why. She ran across the empty street, her breaths coming in ragged gasps, until she reached the white house beside her own. Thankfully, Uncle James never locked his gate. If he had, she wouldn't have been able to get in. She rushed up onto the terrace and opened her mouth to call for him. No sound came out. Her throat felt tight, her voice completely gone. She tried again and again, but only dry gasps left her lips. Frustration and terror welled inside her, as she began pounding her tiny fists against the wooden door, kicking it with all her strength. Bang, bang, bang. She hit it over and over, until the noise she made finally stirred someone awake inside the house.
Hey everyone, Firescale Audiobooks here. If there's a novel you'd love to hear more of, you can support us on Patreon or Ko-fi. Depending on your tier, I'll make extra parts just for the stories you're most excited about. Usually I can only upload 4 to 5 parts of each novel, but with your support, we can go beyond that. And of course, don't forget to hit subscribe. It helps more than you know.
The door swung open with a harsh tone from Uncle James. "What the hell is that?" Raine slumped on the ground when the open door revealed Uncle James in his boxer with a baseball bat on his right hand. "Raine," James looked down at his friend's daughter. "What happened to you?" He crouched down to scoop her in his arms while his eyes wandered around his yard to look for any possibility of threat. But none. There was nothing there except darkness. "Honey, what happened?" He stroked her back, trying to calm her. "Tell me what happened." Bad feeling crept in when James saw blood on the little girl body and Raine kept pointing out toward her house. James looked at the house across the street with narrowed eyes. "And bring her inside and call the police." He instructed his wife, who was crouching down beside him. James passed Raine too, and he stood up to approach his friend's house with baseball bat on his grip. "Be careful," she warned him worriedly and brought Raine into the house before she called police station. Equals 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 equals. 3 hours later, Raine's house had surrounded by many people who was curious to know what had happened to Tatum's family. Police line could be seen, restrained the onlookers to step closer at a crime scene. Sirens from the ambulance car were so loud and deafening as the silent night turned to be a chaos. Inside James' house, Raine buried her face on an embrace. In front of her, there were 2 police officers who were trying to get information from her. "We will come back tomorrow." One of the police officers sighed deeply after failed to retrieve information from the little girl. "My condolences, little Raine." The older police officers walked toward her and stroked her head with sympathy. "We will find the perpetrator." Afterward, both of them were looking for James again to ask another detail, for the fact he was the first person who had approached the house before the police came. Probably he had missed something that could lead their investigation to the murderer. The criminal scene was devastated, if one could say, especially inside Raine's bedroom, as though a bunch of actors from WWF had performed there. Except from that, there was nothing. Remembering the scene, not even a single drop of blood was there. Moreover, there wasn't a single fingerprint in there. That was nearly impossible. Not a single fingerprint could be found in the entire house. James had repeated his statement that he also didn't see a single person when he approached the house. It was strange. The only person who knew the truth was only Raine Tatum, the only daughter of Tatum's family, but she wasn't in a good state for interrogation. "I didn't see anyone when I came," James repeated. Equals 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 equals. 8 years later. Did I make myself clear? Torak's deep voice boomed inside the room that consisting of 6 people of his board of directors. While his gaze swept throughout the room, all of them didn't dare to look at him in the eyes as they hummed in tone of agreement. All of you can leave, except Mr. Ronan. Torak's ocean blue eyes fell on the middle-aged man who was sitting on his right side. Yes, sir. All of them answered in unison and hurriedly collecting their scatter papers on the table as though the next second they stay, their CEO would make their live more miserable than this. Everyone, except Ronan, left the room. The 5 of them were throwing their sympathy look on him. Their common guest was Ronan, as one of the shareholder had done something that unacceptable that caused Torak Donovan needed to talk to him face to face. Since the beginning of the meeting, they felt Torak wasn't in his right mood. He looked more cold and sharp than before. It didn't mean that usually he was cordial and warm with other people, but something must be gone very wrong if they could notice the irritated in his demeanor during the meeting. However, the thing that they didn't know about their discussion was beyond their imagination. After everyone left, a young man in his late 20s came inside the room, and Ronan stood up from his seat, bent his body slightly in respect. Beta Supreme Raphael. He greeted Raphael, Torak's assistant. Raphael nodded his head in acknowledgement as he sauntered across the room and put a stack of .UW mint on the table in front of Torak. Alpha Supreme Torak, you need to take a look at this. Raphael pushed an important .UW mint that needed Torak's attention the most. Torak Donovan, the legendary name from Donovan's sibling who was famous in both human world and supernatural world. He was the famous CEO from Donovan Enterprises Holding Incorporated in human world. Not every soul were fortunate enough to see him. For the soul has been given its own ears to hear things mind does not understand. Rumi, the witches from a northern coven will meet with the vampires near our territory. Based on the information that we got, both parties had arranged an affiliation. Raphael explained while flipping the document. Torak raised his hand, signaling Raphael to stop. We will talk about that matter later, he said in a cold voice. Afterward, he brought his attention towards Ronan. Alpha Ronan, I heard someone from your pack saw a Kanima inside our territory last week. Kanima was a shapeshifter, a mutation of werewolf's gene. They were considered dangerous creatures because they could be used as an instrument of vengeance. These creatures don't seek for a pack or community. Instead, they were looking for a master and would carry out whatever their master bids. Alpha Ronan cast his head down. Yes, Alpha Supreme Torak, he admitted. To have other creatures trespassing their territory was a humiliation for him. Actually, 2 days ago, the other pack member recognized 2 Kanimas who shifted into human form in our territory. Torak's eyebrows scrunched up. How dare them? A deep growl slipped on his lips. Torak lycanthropes territory scoped nearly 70% of the human world, with him being the supreme alpha, while the rest was dominated by demon, vampire, and other creatures. The supernatural creatures were mostly living among humans, even though humans didn't realize about the creature's existence, and it must stay that way. Torak put his elbow on top of the table and buried his face in his palm. He felt anxious recently, and his wolf was on the edge about his surface, yet he didn't know what had caused it. Alpha Supreme Torak, are you all right? Ronan's voice filled with bewilderment, while looking at the beta, who seemed to be in the same confusion as he was. Torak wanted to discuss something with Ronan, and that was the reason why he made him stay. But he was too antsy that drove him crazy. Something didn't feel right, as if he missed something. No one could tell. Torak, Raphael, nudged his shoulder. Besides, as his beta, Raphael was also Torak's close friend. He had been on his side since the first time he established his power in the human world and ruled all the lycanthropes. Alpha Ronan, my apology. I think you should take your leave. Supreme Alpha Torak isn't in good condition. Alpha Ronan didn't say anything anymore as he stood up, nodded to the direction of Supreme Alpha Torak and Beta Raphael before he left the room. Torak, are you okay? Raphael took a seat beside him. Torak raised his head and opened his eyes. However, his ocean blue-colored eyes changed into this pitch-black color, staring to the distance. Torak, your wolf side is on the surface. Raphael pointed out the obvious. I know. Torak said in his rough voice. He closed his eyes for a while before he opened it again, and it returned to its natural ocean blue color. What happened? You look restless recently. I don't know. My wolf wanted to take control. It has been a while since you let your wolf out. Maybe he just needs a little bit of stretch. Raphael shrugged as he stretched his muscle arms. Oh, I need to let my wolf out as well. Caleb is here. The shouting voice, along with the sudden creak from the door, made Torak and Raphael growled. When the door opened, it revealed a young man in his mid-20s stormed inside the meeting room. Next time you do that again, you're going to be fired. Raphael snarled at him. As Caleb made his way toward the chair near him, he gave Raphael a mischievous smirk. From what position? As an assistant or as Gamma? Caleb was the supreme Gamma for Torak, the third in command. Even though he had a reckless behavior, actually he was one of the strongest and smartest wolves that Torak knew. Besides, with that attitude, he could balance Torak Raine in both worlds. Raphael didn't answer his mere, empty question and only threw him a glare. What happened to our alpha? Caleb leaned forward and met with Torak's dark eyes. Your wolf comes to the surface. He repeated Raphael's word, and it only made Torak deeply annoyed. Shut up, both of you. He snapped. Let's go. Torak stood up and walked out of the door. Their day was long, and Torak needed to figure out what was wrong with his wolf. Equals 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 I want to know what my mate is doing now. Caleb sighed and dropped his shoulder down the passenger seat. Apparently, the gloomy night sky on the outside has some side effects for Caleb's mood as he turned to be more emotional. You don't have anything close to a mate, Casanova. Raphael rolled his eyes from behind the wheel. Keep your eyes straight on the street, please. We don't need to have a car accident on 902. Our schedule. Caleb scolded grumpily. Ugh, why I still haven't found my mate yet. You're only 60 years old, barely a pup. Raphael retorted. Excuse me, I am 72. Caleb felt offended for being compared with a puppy. I would have grandchildren if I were a human. I would have my 7th generation if I were a human. Raphael responded, unnecessarily being competitive. You would have died. Caleb corrected. No human will be able to live for 300 years. Because of their long lifespan, this became their private joke sometime. Well, nobody can beat him. Raphael pointed at Torak, who was sitting on the back seat from the rearview mirror. Caleb followed his gaze and looked at Torak, who closed his eyes, seemingly had fallen asleep. Indeed, if it was him, we are talking about centuries. And you're complaining that you don't have a mate. Raphael reminded him in a hushed tone that made Caleb pout. Almost every single soul in the supernatural world knew about the Donovan's curse. They were cursed to live without a mate by the goddess of the moon, but no one knew about another prophecy that occurred after the war had ended. Mate was the most important phase in lycanthropes and werewolves' life, like the essence of their existence. In many cases, male werewolves would have gone feral for a long amount of time if needed, in order to find their other half. After all, their mate was what was balancing their life. On the other hand, for lycanthropes that had longer lifespan, often they would find their mate very late. That was why they were stronger to keep their mind straight compared to werewolves. Yet, it was still a miracle for them to live without mates for centuries as lycanthropes. The street of Fulbright City was still alive despite it having passed midnight, and the gloomy night sky had started drizzling when Raphael heard Torak's guttural voice. Turn right. What? Raphael thought he was misheard him. Instinctively, he looked at him from the rearview mirror and saw Torak's dark eyes looking back at him. Because of the unexpected order, Raphael wasn't responsive enough to change direction. He nearly missed it when Torak abruptly leaned forward and seized the steering wheel from Raphael. Turn right. Torak roared. Shit. Caleb cursed loudly when the car took a sharp turn towards the narrow alley on their right side. Many angry horns could be heard from the other cars that were forced to stop to avoiding consecutive traffic accident. Torak, Raphael, snapped at him angrily. The scene before their eyes spun in dangerous way that made their vision blur for a while. Call me properly. Torak snarled in his alpha tone. Upon hearing the powerful voice from their alpha, Raphael and Caleb couldn't help but lowered their head in submission. Alpha's tone wasn't a joke, especially from the powerful one. Wolf from lower rank wouldn't be able to withstand it. The effect from denying an Alpha's tone was equal like physical torment for them. "Yes, Alpha," both of them said in unison. Torak leaned back against his seat and let Raphael took control of the wheel again. His eyes still black as the pitch of night. The road that Torak chose was a long, straight line of street. So along the way, Raphael was saved from his attempt to grab away the wheel again. "Supreme Alpha Torak, we have another meeting with Alpha Romulus in 20 minutes in this route." Caleb tried to remind him in shaky tone. "Is the opposite direction." However, Torak didn't heed his voice as his eyes fixed on the road before his eyes. Raphael knew very well, if no one could talk otherwise, if Torak's wolf was in control. Their wolf was vicious, ferocious, and most dangerous part of them, so they need to control their beast whole time. The only moment they would let their wolf on the surface was if they needed for protection or aggression. The last time Torak's wolf took control, there was a pack that shed with blood. "What should I do?" Caleb mouthed at Raphael, since the Alpha refused to answer him. Then asking the Beta was his next option. Once again, Raphael looked at Torak from the rearview mirror. His stoic and aloof face showed a warning that said he wouldn't give a damn for anything at this moment. In the end, Raphael shook his head and said in normal voice, so Torak could hear him, "Cancel it." He waited for a while to see if Torak gave an indication to say otherwise. But when he remained unmoved, Raphael sighed and gave a sign to go ahead for Caleb. The noisy boy fished out his phone from his pocket and punched a number. On the third ring, someone picked up the phone, and Caleb talked in well-mannered voice that didn't suit him. Hanging up the phone, Caleb stole a glance at Torak through the rearview mirror and landed his gaze to Raphael. So, Raphael only gave him a glance before focusing his attention toward the road in front of him. The atmosphere inside the car was thick with Torak's wolf appearance. Caleb never saw Torak went berserk. However, the stories that he heard about it was enough to make his hair stand on end. The long road brought them out of the city to the town nearby. They were on the narrow road when Caleb couldn't help to keep his mouth shut any longer. "Supreme Alpha Torak," Caleb turned his head and called him timidly while scratching his nose. "Where we will go." He waited the answer expectantly, but when there was no answer from Torak, he sighed and turned back to look the almost empty dark road. The rain was drizzling when they made their way into more crowded street. "Supreme Alpha, could you tell us your purpose?" "At least I can prepare myself if we need to fight," Caleb mumbled while propping his chin on his palm while looking at the stores that still open in this midnight. On the side, Raphael glared at him. The last thing that he wanted was to provoke Torak. Only God knew what he would do if he really lost it. They thought Torak wouldn't answer Caleb's whinny question, but for their surprise, Torak's rigid expression slightly turned softened as he said, "To meet my mate." The mist crept down along with the drizzling rain that cascading on Raine's face. The girl pulled her hoodie over her head to protect her from getting wet, even though it wasn't much of help. She let her long, straight black hair to flow on her side face, made people hard to see her pale complexion. Raine's black eyes fixed at the street beneath her, avoiding bumping onto people around her by looking to their shoes. She didn't dare to raise her head. No matter where she was, she would often see something that other people couldn't see it. There were another creature around them, and it terrified her since no one else except her was able to see it. She had been trying to pretend that she didn't see any of them since a year ago when they discharged her from mental hospital. However, it was harder to say than actually did. Those creatures were everywhere. Now, she has developed a habit to staring down her shoes to save herself from seeing them. She had learned that those creatures wouldn't pay any attention toward her if she acted as though she didn't see them in the first place. It was a rainy night, and Raine hated to wander around the street by herself, especially when the sun had been set long time ago, because those creatures that were roaming around at this time were creepier than ever. People in Orphanage, the place that she lived now, would say she suffered from agoraphobia. It was an anxiety disorder where the person perceived their environment was unsafe. Raine couldn't argue with this literary. And this was also an easier explanation for her panic attacks rather than had to explain what she saw. If it wasn't to retrieve Mrs. Sullivan's medicine for her asthma from the pharmacy, because if she ran out of the stock, Raine wouldn't have been outside and half wet tonight. She secured the medicine bag under her brown sweatshirt by hugging them. When she arrived at the Pelican Crossing, she pushed the button and raised her head slightly to see the traffic lights. When she saw it flash green with walking person on it, hastily, she walked across the street. At the same time, inside a black SUV. Raphael didn't notice that the traffic light had turned red when Caleb and he whipped their head toward Torak direction, who was sitting on the back seat. "What did you said?" Raphael surprised. "A mate," Caleb chimed in. "Alpha, are you joking now? It is impossible for you to having mate." Torak glared at Caleb that made the boy shuddered under his menacing stare. He often thought that his mouth would bring death to him faster. Literary. He lowered his head, turned as submissive as he could, and fiddled with his own fingers. Meanwhile, Raphael still looked at Torak intently from the rearview mirror with gaping mouth. His lips moved as though he wanted to say something, but he couldn't produce the right words for Torak's statement. Beside him, Caleb saw the flash of the red light, but because he thought Raphael would see it as well, he didn't remind the beta. He was the driver after all. Yet, when he realized the car didn't slow down and a girl would cross the zebra crossing, his eyes turned dark in horror. "Shit," Caleb cursed under his breath. With his Lycan speed, he raised his leg, stepped on the top of Raphael's feet, and slammed the brake. The tires ate the asphalt road with a screech that hurting their ears. "Damn," Raphael muttered when he saw a girl in brown sweatshirt was only an inch away before her body crushed against their car. "You are most welcome." Caleb gave him a nervous, smirked as his eyes returned to the color of green. They couldn't see the girl properly because of her hoodie and her messy hair, but with one look they were certain that the girl was fine. Shocked but fine. It proved when the girl walked away from their sight hastily. She was running, to be exact. "Stop sneak to peek toward our Alpha, my dear Beta. You almost got someone killed." Caleb snapped at him. When Raphael was about to retort his word, a sound of the door opened and slammed shut startled them. In the next second, they saw their Alpha dash trough the Raine. "What now?" Caleb glanced to Raphael. "Get down," Raphael ordered as he pushed the door open, slid himself out of the car, and chased after Torak. "Get down? Now. It is raining," Caleb grumbled as he unbuckled his seatbelt. The rain started pouring down when Raine reached out her arms to push open the worn-out black gate of the orphanage, where she had been living for a year by now. She didn't have another family member that could take care of her, and no one that she knew wanted to take responsibility upon her after she was discharged from mental hospitality. So the system put her in this orphanage until she reached 18 years old and could live by her own lawfully. Where her hand was about to open the gate, someone grabbed her shoulder and spun her harshly. For 2 seconds, she raised her head and saw the man who forced her to face him, and the first thought that flashed her head was, "This man is beautiful." If it wasn't for Raine and her body started shivering because of the cold night, she would have blushed for her own thought. Not to exaggerate the description of that man, but his feature himself was able to put the bodybuilder into a shamed. His enchanting eyes held her captive. It was pitch dark color. His height and weight were bigger and higher than her. His curly black hair was damp with the droplets of the rain that cascaded. Raine's lips gapped open like someone who was screaming, but there was no sound coming out from her mouth. She dropped her eyes from staring at him and wriggled her body out of his grip on her shoulder. Out of the blue, the mysterious man pulled her into his embrace. His big arm wrapped around her waist, and his other arms held her shoulder tightly, but gentle enough to not crush her. "Mine," he whispered into her ears that sent indecipherable feeling down to her stomach. The rain was still pouring down when finally Raine regained her sense and tried to extricate herself from his muscle arms. Raine tried to push him and hit his side, but it seemed her effort wasn't even enough to make him winched. He kept hugging her, oblivious to Raine's attempt to free herself as he buried her head on her shoulder to breathe in her intoxicating scent. Her unique scent was able to calm his nerve, and with his mate in his arms, he could feel the tranquility that he'd never been able to taste in centuries of his life. The spark that lit up from the skin-to-skin contact with his half-soul, exciting his wolf, and made him yearn more. He felt like he was reborn. Those centuries that had passed without his mate looked dull now. He started to wonder how he could live a single day without her. Is it the mate bond? He had never felt so helpless, yet powerful at the same time. He even scared with what he felt now. He scared with what this little girl, which the tip of her head only managed to reach his shoulder, could do to him. He cursed the moon goddess to spell a curse upon him, but grateful that he finally found his mate. The feeling was simply unbearable. Torak felt someone walked closer toward his direction. Immediately his body turned rigid as he let out a low growl. A warning. About 100 meters away, Raphael was standing with umbrella on his right hand. Torak, it's me. He stopped walking when he heard his growl and defensive posture. You need to release her. Instead of release Raine, he tightened his grip on her waist that made her winched in pain. He didn't mean to hurt her, but in a state now, he couldn't control his strength. For a moment he lost it. Seemingly he didn't recognize his beta. Torak, if you continue like that, you will end up kill her. Raphael took another step closer. You hurt your mate. Raphael's final words seemed sinking in Torak's sense as he looked down at his mate expression. Her brows scrunched, and she bit her trembling lips while her obsidian eyes staring back at him, laced with fear. He closed his eyes, fighting his wolf for control, and won the internal struggle. Torak's jaw clenched tightly. He liked it when the other creatures feared him. It gave him a sense of control, and every lycanthropes and werewolves loved being in control. But when his mate looked at him in the same way, he felt an urge to strangle anything who was daring enough to scare her. Unfortunately, it was him. He didn't believe it. Hundreds of years ago, he had said that he would have snapped his mate into two when he found her. Then now, the first moment he sensed her, he was utterly and desperately had a very strong desire to protect her. This stupid mate bond. Torak opened his ocean blue eyes. Raine's eyes widened and her lips parted in shock. She was very sure that a minute ago the man's eyes were black, not blue. But now the eyes that were staring back at her was this beautiful blue color, which could drown her in a matter of seconds. She stared at his eyes for a while before realized that his grip on her body had been loosened. She used this opportunity to escape. However, she wasn't fast and strong enough to shove him aside. In the end, she fell on his embrace again. Don't be afraid, I won't hurt you, he said in tone like he was pleading. His voice soothed her ears, and for a moment, somehow, she believed him. There was this odd, tingling feeling like there were butterflies in her stomach. Raine stopped struggling as she felt his strong arms held her steadily. But her fear was still there. Her body was trembling. Raphael walked closer toward them, opened the second umbrella, and held it above Torak and Raine. Is it her? Raphael asked softly. Yes, mine. Torak answered with a sigh of relief and proudness. He brushed away her damp hair to have a better access to look at her face. The girl in his embrace has a beautiful pair of obsidian eyes, which avoiding his. She was biting her lower lips nervously that made him pull her chin and freed her lips. Her skin was so pale as though the sunlight had never been able to reach her. Her body was so small, but so right in his embrace. It wouldn't be exaggerating if he said he was more than able to snap her into two in a matter of seconds. Yet, even the idea to hurt her was dread him. Raine, what are you doing there? Where's the medicine? A familiar voice snapped Raine's sense. She turned her body and saw Madame and the head nurse in the orphanage was standing behind the steel bar of the gate. Her fat fingers worked on the gate lock as her other hand was holding a yellow umbrella. At this time, the rain had poured down in torrents and none of the four of them were in good shape under the harsh wind. What are you doing, gentlemen? Madame, and shot and angry, looked toward Torak, who was still holding Raine in his embrace. Let her go, she demanded. The girl once again wriggled her body to free herself, but Torak refused to let her go. Torak, you must let her go, Raphael whispered, and he swore that Torak's eyes for a moment flickered in red color before it turned blue again. Startling, he added hurriedly, she drenches in cold. She will get sick if we stay longer here. Raphael pulled his tie nervously. Red eyes for Lycan wasn't a good sign. It was mean the wolf inside was livid because of his suggestion to let her go. Torak looked down at Raine, and only now he realized her poor condition. "We will bring her with us," he said succinctly. "No, we can't do it that way." Raphael shook his head. "This isn't your territory, Torak. You can't do as you please. Probably, she still has family here. For God's sake, Raph, she is an orphan." Torak growled. "And yes, I can do as I please. I don't give a damn who's in charge here. They can complain after I bring my mate with me." "Sir," Madame's patient was getting thin as he put her free hand on her hips. "I need you to release the girl now." The disrespect of Madame N's voice made Torak growl dangerously, and it made Raine become more uncomfortable. She looked at Madame and with tears on the brim of her eyes, unable to release herself from Torak's deadly grip. "Hold her!" Torak snatched the umbrella that Raphael was holding for them and handed Raine toward him. Once Torak released her, she attempted to run toward Madame, but Raphael held her shoulder firmly. "Please stay, we won't hurt you," he said in low voice, enough for Raine to hear. However, she was so scared and determined to get herself free. Turning around, she bit down Raphael's hand that was holding her shoulder. Surprised by what she did, not by the petty bite, Raphael released his hand from her shoulder. He looked helplessly toward Raine, who was running toward Madame in direction. Yet before the little girl could reach her savior, Torak grabbed her waist and brought her to his side, again, ignoring the shriek from Madame and in Raine's attempt to hit him. Turning around, the Alpha shot his Beta a dagger, looked for failing his duty that Raphael reciprocated with a nervous grin. "What do you want?" she snapped and tried to threaten him. "I will call guard if you don't release her," Madame demanded. "How many guards do you think that she needs to stop the Alpha?" A grumpy voice echoed inside Raphael's mind. Out of the blue, a big gray wolf with height around Raphael's hips appeared beside him. "I told you to come," he replied to the wolf through the mind link. Since wolves couldn't talk, they would communicate with mind link when they were in wolf form. "I'm here," Caleb answered mischievously while wagging his bushy tail like a puppy. "You didn't tell me specifically that I have to come in human form, right? It is raining. I don't want my $1,000 suit got wet," he retorted smartly. For the shape-shifter like them, once they were in their other form, it's mean they were in another realm. No human was able to see them. The most benefit thing for them was they could keep their clothes intact when they returned into human form, so they didn't need to stark in a KED or bit boxer brief for their change. Raphael didn't say anything when he kicked him, however Caleb avoided his feet lazily. Both of them looked toward the direction of Torak and the fatty woman who was, finally, talking calmly despite the heavy rain that pouring down. "It's her." Caleb pointed his snout toward the girl who was cowering in Torak's embrace. "Our Luna." "Yes, it's her." "Seriously? What is she?" "Faye." But Faye wasn't a shapeshifter. He mumbled. In other words, human couldn't see them. Raphael glanced down at the gray wolf, puzzled. "She is human, of course." The wolf raised the corner of his lips and showed his canine that Raphael assumed as a smirk. "She was clearly seeing me a moment ago. No human could see me in my wolf form." Raphael looked at Raine, but the little girl had buried her face in Torak's arms, since she couldn't get away from him. After 5 minutes of discussion, finally Madame nodded to whatever Torak's suggestion and let him went inside the orphanage as she opened the gate and held it for him. Like on cue, Raphael approached them when a white plastic bag caught his attention. Bent his body slightly, he took the plastic bag with him as he continued to walk inside the building with the wolf tailing behind him. The orphanage building was very big and obsolete. It seemed the building had been built for centuries and had been a long time since the last time they renovated it. Madame walked ahead with Torak and Raine. In his arms, followed her closely. Meanwhile, Raphael and Wolf Caleb walked side by side, 3 meters away from them. They walked along the hallway in silence before Madame stopped in front of a blue door. She opened it. "Both of you can rest here for tonight. I will ask someone to deliver clean clothes for both of you. I want to talk about her adoption now," Torak said right after Madame finished talking. Immediately, Raphael knew where this conversation would be going, and he stepped closer. "Sir, we can discuss about this tomorrow morning." Madame slightly frowned. I will not wait until morning. Torak was talking with her, but his eyes never left the girl beside him. Sir, she fumed, but her word was cut briefly. From the side, Raphael cleared his throat to get their attention and introduced himself politely. Please let me introduce myself first. He stepped closer toward them and looked at the distasteful expression that etched on Madamon's face. I am Raphael Lockwood, personal assistant of Torak Donovan. Raphael gestured at Torak beside him, who was still holding Raine's waist. Knowing her attempt was futile, she didn't try to escape again. Meanwhile, in a matter of second, Madame and shrieked and closed her mouth with her big hand. Are you the multi-billionaire Mr. Donovan? She gasped and leaned forward to take a better look at the man who was standing mightily right in front of her. Who didn't know Donovan's name? He was the most famous bachelor among the businesswomen and women in general. The successful businessman who rarely appeared in public, but once people saw him, it was hard to forget. His strong aura made his figure engraved in every mind. Madame didn't notice him before because of lack of light and rainy night. But now when Raphael mentioned it and she saw him with her own eyes, it's him. She let out a stifled scream. She was an unmarried woman in her early 30s, of course with a sight of Torak Donovan before her eyes with droplets of water cascading from his hair. It was a heavenly view. I am and Julian. She stuttered. Caleb snickered in his wolf form beside Raphael. You make the lady get heart attack, he jested. Raphael ignored him as he continued talking with her. Good evening, Ms. Julian. And please, she said sheepishly. And Raphael nodded politely. We would like to talk about the adoption right now, because this morning we need to return to the redriver city, and we need to bring her with us. Torak didn't pay attention toward the discussion that was happening or reciprocated and smile at him. He was preoccupied by the girl beside him. Raine was licking her shoes, fretting in his arm. He could feel her body trembling. Now, Torak wondered. He hadn't heard her voice from the first time he saw her. Why she didn't talk? What's your name? Torak asked softly, but Raine even didn't raise her head. Ignoring her conversation with Raphael, it was and who answered him instead. Her name is Raine. Raine, Torak repeated and liked the way her name rolled on his tongue. Beautiful name. He complimented. How old are you? He thought. She must be very young, a teenager at least. She is 17 years old, sir, and answered him again with her overly sweet voice. Did I ask you? Torak raised his head to glare at her. He wanted to hear her voice, but this woman kept answering his question. It's annoyed him. No, sir, but she stuttered. But she won't answer your question. Why? Torak furrowed his eyebrows. She didn't talk, and glanced at Raine, who still lowered her head. I think Raine need to change before she catches a cold. Raphael pointed out Raine's wet sweatshirt and jeans. Torak glared at Raphael, who continuously sent his mate away, but agreed with his point. Yes, you need to change. He grumbled. Torak reluctantly let go of his little mate, who was shivering from fear and cold. Swiftly she hid herself behind N's back. Raine didn't immediately go to change her clothes, but slightly tilted her head, asking and permission. Only after nodded, she moved away. Torak didn't like this. Why his mate needed to ask for permission to leave. Raine, I think you forgot something. Raphael raised the white plastic bag that contained with medicine that Raine brought before. Raine stopped and turned to look at him, but didn't make any movement to come closer. Probably still afraid if Torak changed his mind and caught her again. Occasionally, she would glance at Caleb's direction. This gesture confirmed Caleb's conjecture earlier that mentioned she was able to see him. Torak snatched the white plastic bag from Raphael's hand and strode toward her. Raine became tensed as if considering to run away, but Torak briskly took her hand and handed it. Change your clothes. We will leave immediately, he said. He could see the confusion and fear in her eyes as she clutched the plastic bag from him and ran away, cut off the sparks that Torak felt from skin-to-skin contact with her. He took a deep breath to calm his inner wolf that wanted so badly to chase after his mate. Follow her, Torak said through mind link to Caleb, who was chasing his own tail. The gray wolf stood on his four legs and began to walk lightly toward the direction where Raine had disappeared. equals 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 equals. Inside the office, and left an old woman with a round glasses perched on the bridge of her nose before she left the room, saying she would check on Raine. The old woman looked grumpy because her good night's sleep was interrupted. However, neither Torak nor Raphael paid attention to this fact. They needed to finish the matter here as soon as possible. It was already polite of them to deal with this paper of adoption and followed the rule instead of brought her away. Mrs. Lang, the person in charge in this orphanage, looked agitated when she handed all the paper that needed to be signed. Mr. Donovan, you still have counseling meeting to attend. Mrs. Lang was holding Raine's doc that UDOT meant when she explained the procedure of adoption. I have to return to the redriver city this morning, and I will bring her with me. The following procedure will be handled by my people. Torak said with finality as he took the doc that UDOT meant in Mrs. Lang's hand impatiently. He sat on the couch and let Raphael deal with the grumpy old lady. Both of them were talking about the process of adoption while Torak was flipping Raine's doc that UDOT meant. She had been in mental hospital for 3 years. Torak voiced out his question while still holding the report. Yes, she was just discharged a year ago, Mrs. Lang said. She pushed her glasses while she continued. She never talked since the first time she was here. What happened to her? Raphael chimed in. Based on the report that I received, in the age of 8 she lost both of her parents. After that, there was a close friend of her father that adopted her, but that family found something wrong with Raine and put her in mental hospital. For what reason? Raphael asked, although somehow he knew the answer. Mrs. Lang shrugged. They said she kept talking about something that doesn't make sense, such as she kept talking about creepy creatures around her, and there was one of them that wanted to kill her. Raphael glanced at Torak, who was tightened his grip on the paper. His jaw clenched tightly when he heard there was another supernatural creature hunted his mate, and this fool human put Raine in mental hospital instead. The family that adopted Raine didn't want to take her back, so they put her in this orphanage. Mrs. Lang sighed. May I know why do you insist to adopt her? Raphael was about to answer, but Torak beat him to it. I owe his father a great favor, so I intended to return the good deed. Torak lied smoothly. It seemed Mrs. Lang only asked that question out of curiosity, not even concerned to ask for more detail. Apparently, she was relieved that there was someone else who wanted to take the girl. Honestly, she was a little bit scared by Raine's behavior. That girl is creepy. Torak didn't like the distasteful look that Mrs. Lang showed him when she talked about his mate, as subconsciously he let out a deep growl that startled her. Raphael cleared his throat, went and walked inside the room to save the awkward situation. Where is Raine? Torak stood up in alert when he saw and came alone, and gave the hot multi-billionaire a sheepish smile before she answered him. She refused to come out from her room. I can't persuade her. Without waiting another explanation, Torak had taken another step toward the door, didn't even bother to ask in the direction of Raine's room. He could track his mate's scent just fine. The refreshing smell of the damp earth after rain, it soothed his strained nerves. For lycanthropes and werewolves, their mate's scent was stronger than any other scent that they could smell. His mate's smell brought him along the hallway and down the stairs that seemed connected to the BAS.M.E.T. He frowned. Why his mate lived in the BAS.M.E.T. He followed the stairs to the dim hallway. In the end of it, he saw Caleb's gray wolf pacing back and forth in front of an obsolete wooden door. Torak used his Lycan speed to approach Caleb. In the next second, he stood in front of the door and turned the knob, but it has been locked. He trailed his fingers on the surface of the wood, considering to bust it down, and made his way to his mate, but it would startle her, and the last thing he wanted was his mate afraid of him. He could feel her fear when he held her earlier, and that made him uncomfortable. What happened? He asked Caleb through MindLink. The gray wolf stopped walking as he sat on his back leg while looking up at Torak. Supreme Alpha, she is able to see me in my wolf form, and because I followed her, apparently it scared her. Torak glared at Caleb, that made the wolf lowered his head straight to the floor. Not long after that, Raphael and Mrs. Lang approached them. They were running down the stairs and almost lost their breath when they reached him, except Raphael, of course. He even didn't break a sweat. "Mr. Donovan, how did you know this is her room?" Anne asked, puzzled. Yet, Torak was so impatient to even hear her question as he asked hurriedly, "You have spare key to open the door?" "Yes, yes." Mrs. Lang was still panting when she fished out a bunch of keys from her pocket. She always locked herself inside the room, so I'm always ready with her key room, in case she did something stupid inside there. The old woman grumbled while she put the key inside the lock and turned it over. The click sound echoed in the dim hallway when finally the door opened. Torak took over the knob door from Mrs. Lang's hand as he pushed it open and impatiently walked inside the room. He balled his fist when he saw how poor his mate's room. His bathroom was bigger than this. Inside that small room, which only consisting a small bed, a small cabinet and small table, he saw Raine curled on the corner of her bed, trembling while hugging herself, burying her face between her knees. Torak stopped on his step. "What are you doing sitting there? Mr. Donovan had been waiting for you." Mrs. Lang reprimanded her. "Hurry and pack your thing." She seemed couldn't wait to get rid of Raine. "Get out." Torak closed his eyes to hide his eyes that had turned black. With the way Mrs. Lang talked to Raine, he could imagine the poor treatment that they gave to her, and the way she lived in fear made him unsettled. When there was no movement, he faced them with fury burning in his eyes. Patience has never been a forte for any Lycan. "I said, get out." Torak stressed every syllable in his command. It was Raphael that finally ushered the two women out of the room. He talked about finishing the paperwork of Raine's adoption, and there would be another people who would handle the next necessary procedure. Once it was only Torak, Raine, and the gray wolf. Torak took a seat on the edge of her bed as the bed screeched under his weight, and it startled Raine. She raised her head and looked at him with fear dancing on her black eyes. "I will not hurt you," Torak said without breaking their eyes contact. "Please, we have to go." He reached out his hand carefully. He had never said please to anyone, but he pleaded her not to be afraid of him. Raine looked at Torak's big hand and the gray wolf that tilted his head innocently while looking at her. She had seen wolf before. They rarely appeared and never attack her like the other creatures, but to actually saw them, it still gave her a thrill. These creatures' size was 3 times bigger than the actual wolves. Torak followed her gaze. "Shift," he said toward Caleb. Caleb stepped aside, disappeared from Raine's line of sight before he appeared again in his suit. Scratching the back of his hand, he gave Raine a big warm smile. "Hello, Raine. My name is Caleb." Raine's eyes widened in shock. Her lips parted. She didn't know if they could transform into human. "Caleb, you can wait outside," Torak said while assessing Raine's expression. She's shocked, yet it was plainly could be seen that it wasn't her first time to encounter a shapeshifter. Caleb grinned at Raine before he closed the door. "We need to go now, my love," Torak said softly. His tone changed drastically when he talked with her. The endearment word in his sentence made Raine looked at him in confusion. She didn't know why this stranger called her like that, and she didn't want to blindly follow him. Torak sighed when he saw her reaction. Ignoring her uncomfortable, he moved closer until his chest touched her knees. She petrified. "You are my mate, Raine, and no sane creatures will hurt their own mate, no matter how evil creatures you are." He looked at her right in her eyes. "Don't fear me. I will never hurt you. I will never let anyone hurt you." It had been a long time since the last time someone gave a comforting look like Torak gave to her, without any judgment and resentment. This past 8 years, she slowly began to get used with the way other people around to see her. Especially when they put her in the mental hospital, she was the crazy girl. They had been avoiding her like a plague ever since. They gave her a look as if she had grown 3 heads and would throw disgusting gaze. But the stranger in front of her was different. His eyes held concerned, and in weird way her body relaxed around him. Torak stretched out his hand and cupped her face in his big palm. "Can you feel that?" he whispered in his husky voice. "Spark." Raine could feel the spark that electrocuted her skin when he touched her. It didn't hurt, but tickled her in a nice way. She felt it before when Torak hugged her, but didn't think about it further because of her fear. But now, when she felt it clearly, it made her felt a warm sensation was creeping around her face, the kind of sensation that made her want to touch him more. She felt safe. "You feel it too, right?" Torak moved closer and touched his forehead with hers. Hurting you is like hurt myself, and I will never do that, he whispered to her. His warmth breath and the spark sensation that Raine felt made her tensed nerves relaxed. Now, will you come with me? Raine nodded. Her body answered him before her mind could process it. Yet, to think about how she had been living in this past year in the orphanage, she knew she wouldn't regret her decision. She believed him, and it was strange, but at the same time she knew it was the right thing to do. The mate bond worked its way. Good. Torak pulled away from her and beamed into a bright smile that seemingly put Raine under a spell as she couldn't draw her eyes from him. We need to go now, my love. Torak retracted his hand from her face. The loss of spark made Raine slightly frowned, but he took her hand instead and helped her to stand up. Even though Raine was still uncomfortable from their proximity, she didn't reject his touch. Originally, Torak wanted to hug her so badly upon seeing fear still etched on her beautiful eyes, yet he realized that his clothes still soaked from the rain earlier, and he didn't want to make her clothes wet. Her true spirit was a guardian angel, but the body that she occupied was a human form. Thus, she would get sick like any normal human. Torak made a mental note about this. Raine was wearing a gray sweatshirt that seemed 2 sizes bigger than her actual size and ripped jeans. Her hair was slightly damp as droplets of water traced her delicate face to her neck. He frowned. My love, you don't have a hairdryer? If he let her hair wet in this cold weather, it most likely she would catch a cold. Raine stared at his hand that was holding hers while shaking her head. Sit. Torak made her sat on the edge of the bed as he grabbed the towel from on top of the cabinet. The small room made it unnecessary to walk around, as everything was within his arm's reach. He released her hand and dried her hair with the towel gently. No one talked during that time, but the silence was so comfortable for both of them. After there was no more drop of water from her hair, Torak tossed the wet towel carelessly and grabbed her hand again. Let's go. He pushed the door and saw Caleb was leaning on the wall across them with his eyes closed. It had been 7 years since the first time Caleb was promoted to be his gamma, and Torak couldn't understand how he could fall asleep anywhere. We will leave now. Torak's stern voice woke the sleepy Lycan as he rubbed his eyes. Oh, yes, Alpha. I have called the driver to fetch us. They must have been waiting for us now. Torak nodded and led Raine to get out from that damn place. However, he felt the tug on his sleeves. He stopped and looked at Raine, who lowered her head as she clutched the edge of his shirt, trying to get his attention. Yes, my love. Torak stopped and gave her his whole attention. On the side, Caleb's jaw dropped to the ground when he heard the endearment word from his alpha. He would never have thought that this scary creature could be so sweet toward his mate. Caleb saw Raine pointed her fingers toward her bedroom, and he tilted his head, puzzled, what this little human wanted. Why she didn't talk? However, surprisingly, Torak knew what she wanted to say as he replied. You don't need to pack anything. We'll buy everything you need. There was nothing worthy there. Even this place wasn't worthy for his precious mate. To think about how his mate spent her days in a place like this made his wolf frenzied. Raine bit her lips and shook her head as she stared at her shoes again. Gently, Torak held her chin and raised her head to look at him in the eye. There is something important for you there? Raine nodded, and Caleb stared at both of them in disbelief. Go and get it. I will be here. Raine gave him a faint smile that didn't go unnoticed by Torak. This small gesture from her mate his wolf purred with satisfaction. Meanwhile, Caleb was wondering how his alpha knew what his mate wanted with only that small gesture. Mate bond was indeed a magical and amazing thing. The sky was still dark, but the rain had stopped. By the time they were out of the orphanage, 2 black cars had been waiting for them at the entrance gate and insisted to accompany them, while Mrs. Lang chose to continue her good night's sleep. The night wind was so cold, but it seemed didn't have any effect on Torak and Raphael, while Caleb had shifted into his wolf form and had long gone. The hallway was slippery by the splash of rain, and Raine almost tripped couples of time. Fortunately, Torak was nimble enough to catch her. Raine, you have to watch your behavior and don't give Mr. Donovan a hard time, and warned her sternly. She was getting used to threatening her ever since the first time she arrived. You have to know yourself, and don't bring a shame on Mr. Donovan. Understood. Raine kept staring the slippery floor beneath her. Careful to not trip again, She had gotten used with the way and talked to her as well, so she didn't pay much attention to what she said when she nodded. She could do whatever she wanted. Even if she wanted to tear this place down, I don't have any objection. She just needs to say it, Torak said icily. He sneaked his hand around her waist to help her walk steadily. On the other side, and laughed wryly when she heard Torak's statement, she thought it was just a very bold joke. Thing that she didn't know was Torak meant his every words. When they were 100 meters away from the entrance gate, they saw Caleb in his human form approaching them. In his hand, he brought a blanket and a leather jacket. Sir, Caleb stopped right in front of Torak and handed a blanket that Torak wrapped it around Raine's body before he wore the leather jacket to cover his wet clothes. Raine whipped her head and looked at him in surprise that Torak thought very adorable. He secured the blanket on her body before he picked her up and carried her bridal style toward the cars that had been waiting for them. Caleb grimaced when he saw Anne's face fell the moment she watched the way Torak treated Raine. A multi-billionaire CEO was carrying an ex-patient from mental hospital? Who would believe this? But this happened for real. Raphael and Caleb left the dumbfounded, and they didn't say anything when both of them took their leave. Being wrapped like a hot dog, Raine couldn't free herself. She looked at him with a questioning look that he understood immediately. The floor is wet. I don't want you to get hurt. Raine couldn't help but bit her lips. Despite the wonderful sensation of the spark, she still felt a little bit uncomfortable with their proximity. After all, no one had ever got so close to her and hold her so considerately like the way he did in these past years. Carefully, Torak put her down inside the black SUV that had been waiting for them. He put her in the passenger seat and pulled a strap across her chest, buckled her seatbelt. After that, he walked around the front car and took a seat behind the wheel. The rest of people who came for them took another car, including Raphael and Caleb. This was the first time for Raine to leave the orphanage since she arrived there. So, she was anxious. Raine had seen how Caleb transformed from a big gray wolf into human form. These people weren't like any normal human, or they were not even human. She glanced at Torak beside her, who started back the car out of the driveway. Is he the same like Caleb? Could he turn into a wolf? Will he hurt me? Many questions roamed her head. Without she realized, she had been staring at him. Torak caught Raine's curious eyes, but she hastily retracted her gaze and lowered her head, hiding her face between her silky hairs before she pulled the hoodie on her sweatshirt over her head, completely concealed herself. Raine rarely looked at other people in the eyes, as she afraid by the way those people judge her and the condescending in their gaze. She clutched the blanket around her and hoped Torak didn't notice her presence. Unfortunately, the only existence that he cared was her. He stopped the car. The clutch on the blanket tightened as Raine wondered if she did something wrong. She could feel it when Torak reached out his hand at her. Will he hit me? Raine shivered with that thought. Torak pulled back the hoodie off her head and gently tucked her hair behind her ear. Don't, he said firmly. I want to see you. Don't hide yourself. Don't, he said firmly. I want to see you. Don't hide yourself. He was running his fingertips along Raine's jawline as the surge of electricity spreading across their skin once they touched. The tingling feeling made Raine slightly inclined to the caress, but kept her head low. After a moment, Torak retracted his hand and averted his gaze from his little mate back to the road ahead. The ray of street lights illuminated the darkness of the highway. This morning he had a meeting with 4 alphas in his South Territory that he needed to attend. The one that discussing about the Rouges, Hunter, and also there was an important issue about an alliance between the witches from Northern Coven and Vampire, added that to the appearance of another shapeshifter. He simply has a tight schedule. Torak wanted to spend more time with his mate, but his position didn't allow him to derelict his responsibility as a supreme alpha. He glanced at his mate beside him. Raine was drifting in and out in her sleepiness. Her eyelashes fluttered closed in the next second as her breathing became steady. The sound of her heartbeat was like a calming melody for his broken soul. It had been 700 years of solitariness, a long-awaited years for Lycan to live without mate, even for the strongest one. It was a blessing and a curse for him and his brothers to be able to keep their minds sane until today. The dull live, covered with bloody battles and countless schemes between two worlds that he had been living through, left him nothing except deserted soul and an evil beast laid in his immortality. But she came at the point he had long forgotten about the salvation that Selene, the moon goddess, had talked about. Her presence gave him the tranquility that he never had. Torak glanced at his mate one more time as the rhythmic of her breathing complement the patter rain outside the car that started pouring down the earth once again, giving another chances to survive for a barren land and a wretched soul. Equals 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 equals. Raine slept through the morning and only woke up when she heard a noisy voice. It sounded like more than two people were having an argument. However, their voices weren't clear, as if they were far away from her. She opened her eyes and closed it immediately when the bright light invading her sight. As soon as her senses had functioned, she could feel the soft silk blanket that covered her body and the comforted bed swallowed her whole. If someone walked into the room, they wouldn't be able to tell if she was there. She was completely out of sight. Raine shielded her eyes from the blinding light with both of her hands, turned her back from the window where the source of the blazing sun came from. When gradually her eyes could adjust with it, she lowered her hands. The soft pillow made Raine reluctant to lift her head and inspecting her surroundings. She didn't have memory how she could sleep on the bed. The last thing she remembered was the vibrating patter of rain against the car had lulled her into deep slumber. Torak must have carried her into this room, and she didn't recall anything about it. Talking about him, where is he? Raine pushed her body to sit as her eyes wandering the room. It was a huge room with a set of windows against the wall, accompanied by French doors that led to a balcony. The doors were closed, but the lace-soft blue curtains were pulled open. This room was 3 times bigger than Mrs. Lang's office, and of course more gorgeous. There was a huge television adhered at the wall in front of her, and a set of 6 comfortable sofas on the other side of the room with a round table in the middle of it. Raine got off from the bed as a soft woven rug welcomed her feet when she stepped out from the comfort of the bed. She was completely oblivious by the argument behind the door, which somehow was still progressing. Raine was captivated by the splendid chandelier hanging from the ceiling in the middle of the room that was sparkling under the sun rays when the door burst open that made her startled. The open door exposed the most beautiful woman that Raine had never seen before, walking into the room. Her long blonde hair fell beautifully behind her back that reached her hips. She was wearing a body-hugging blue dress with V-neck collar that made her cleavage was in full display. "Jen, you are not allowed to come inside." A burly man with full arms tattoo on his right hands followed her hastily and grabbed the elbow of a woman named Jen. Supreme Alpha Torak didn't allow anyone to come inside the room. He groaned in frustration. "I'm not just anyone." Jen brushed away the man's hand from her elbow and proceeded to approach Raine, who had cowered beside a cabinet. She looked at her bare feet nervously. Raine didn't know this woman, and despite her good looking, she didn't feel comfortable when Jen approached her. The first question that spilled from her sexy lips was, "Are you Alpha Torak's mate?" Raine didn't quite understand what the word mate and what she was trying to ask her. Still, even if she understood the explanation of mate, she couldn't answer her nonetheless. The tattoo man decided to answer Jen's question when he saw Raine didn't even lift her head to look at the blonde woman. "Yes, she is," he said firmly and a little bit threatening when he continued. "So, you better watch your words and attitude." Jen snorted by the warning. She was in her killer 10 centimeters high heels, so the petite figure like Raine would look so pathetic compared to her. Not to mention Jen was all curves and bling of diamond, while on the other hand Raine was wearing a worn-out sweatshirt that was bigger than her size with a ripped jeans. Practically the queen and the beggar. Jen ignored his words and folded her hands as she introduced herself. "I am Jennifer Crawford." Her voice ringing in Raine's ears, and Jen was full with enthusiasm that she didn't have. "And you are?" Jen tilted her head graciously. She didn't talk. That man informed her awkwardly with a low voice. "Didn't talk," Jen repeated louder. She scrutinized the girl in front of her from head to toe intently as a smirk rose on the corner of her lips. "Well, If she doesn't talk, at least she can eat right. Nonchalantly, she grabbed Raine's hand and ushered her out of the room. Raine was being ushered out of the room with Jin, was grabbing her hand tightly, nullified her attempt to shake her away. She didn't like when someone dragged her, because it reminded her how those nurses had treated her when she was still in the mental hospitality. Fortunately, the tattoo man caught up to her when Jin was about to open the door and snapped Jin's hand, which holding Raine. However, her grip was too tight, and she refused to let Raine go. This resulted the excruciating pain on her wrist. She practically could feel Jin's nails embedded in her skin, and if she still refused to let her go, with the same strength that she used now, it would leave an ugly bruises on it. I am the daughter of Alpha Xavier. How dare a merely warrior like you told me what I have to do? Jin growled at the tattoo man as she tightened her grip on Raine's wrist. Raine tried to release her hand from Jin, but she didn't budge an inch. She was too strong, and if she kept continuing her pressure, she could snap her hand into two. The tattoo man saw the grimace on Raine's face. Despite her silence, the pain that caused from Jin was clear to see. You hurt her. He growled back at the beauty in front of him. Step back, warrior. I will just bring her to eat. Jin stomped her feet angrily, and when the tattoo man wanted to block her way again, she hissed threateningly at him. Only because Supreme Alpha Torak found his mate doesn't mean he will disregard our 5 years relationship. Something in her tone hinted that she was referring to something else in their relationship. Raine easily caught that. Moreover, the tattoo man who had been following Torak for more than 10 years by now. That statement didn't make him budge from his position, but when Jin walked out off the room, he didn't try to stop her again. Raine, puzzled by his reaction and be more confused by Jin's intention to bring her away. The grip on her hand didn't loosen too, and now her hand was getting numb because her blood was being blocked. She turned her head and looked back through her shoulder to see the tattoo man was following them a few meters away. Jin literally dragged her along the hallway. She entered the elevator and pressed the button for the lobby. Once they were in the elevator, Jin pulled back her hand, which made Raine feel relieved. Raine stood on the corner of the elevator, cradled her hand with Jin stood next to her, and the tattoo man near the elevator door. Supreme Alpha Torak will be furious with your act now. Jin ignored his comment as she flicked her long blonde hair from her shoulder and shot a devious smile to Raine. So, she really doesn't talk? Is she mute? Her question was laced with mocking tone that made Raine look at her bare feet. Jin had whisked her out of the room without considering her appearance. Now, Raine was only wearing her oversized, worn-out sweatshirt with ripped jeans without any slipper or shoes to cover her feet from the coldness of the floor. Raine looked like a beggar. No, Jin made her look like a beggar with her, standing next to Raine. People who watched them would be subconsciously comparing each other. It was humiliation. Raine didn't talk, but it didn't mean she didn't know about Jin's intention. Thus, when the door of the elevator opened, she remained on the corner where she was standing, determined she wouldn't go with her. However, when Jin realized this, Raine's little act didn't please her as she seethed. I'm just bringing you for eat. What are you doing standing like a fool there? Jin, the tattoo man snapped at her, even though she was an Alpha's daughter, but he carried another order that had more value from the Supreme Alpha. Only because the fact that Jin had an ambiguous relationship with the Supreme Alpha Torak, he tolerated her. But if something happened too soon to be their Luna, the title for Alpha's mate, only God knew how long he could preserve his little life. Don't raise your voice in front of me. Jin bit back sharply at him. No matter how tough the tattoo man, he couldn't resist the alpha blood that ran in Jin's veins. This alpha blood thing carried more gravity in her every demand, the effect depending on how powerful this alpha. If the daughter of Alpha could make the tattoo man felt restless by her rising tone, then someone as powerful as Torak could inflict a sharp and crucial pain on him. In worst case, he could suffer major injuries just by disobeying his alpha's tone. The tattoo man fisted his hand, still refused to submit to her. Supreme Alpha Torak won't please with this, he muttered. When both of them still quarreled in front of the elevator door, right at that time, the instrument chose to make a noisy beep rapidly, which reminded them that they had stood long enough and hindered the working mechanism. Unexpectedly, Raine took that clutter moment to dash out from the elevator door. She shoved away Jen hardly until she lost her balance on her high heels and stumbled onto the tattoo man who was standing right before her. Fortunately, like most of Lycan, his reflex was quick to secure Jen. In the time they managed to adjust their balance, Raine had gone from their sight. The tattoo man could feel his blood drain from his head to his toe in a matter of seconds. Without thinking twice, he was mind-linking all the other warriors nearby anxiously. "Luna is gone," he shouted in panic through the mind link. Later on, just after his statement, a wave of pain struck him greatly that made him fell on his knees. It wasn't only him who could feel it, but the other Lycans were feeling the same. They staggered simultaneously. In spite the higher rank has weaker effect, they could still feel the pain. This agony could be inflicted by only one Lycan, and he was beyond enraged at that very moment. Torak was listening to Alpha Xavier submitted his report when he caught an antsy message through the link. He was supposed to block all the communication during this meeting, but he didn't do it due to his uneasiness for leaving Raine alone in one of the hotel room, one floor below where he was. Raine wasn't really alone because he had ordered James, one of his best warriors, to stand on guard out of her room, while another lycanthropes were blending with other human beings, scattered all over the hotel building. Raine would be safe for 3 hours without his presence, but he couldn't help the gravity of the mate bond that had taken its toll on him. Torak didn't expect this either when he caught the mind link that was sent by James. "Luna is gone," was all he needed to storm out of the meeting room, disregarding other alphas who were presences. A deep growl pierced his throat when he yanked open the door from its hinge. But he didn't care about that. He wanted to tear apart that stupid warrior for actually lost his Luna. Raphael followed him suit, while Caleb a second late, due to the sudden pain that washed over him as a consequence of Torak's rage. He stumbled to the door to catch up with them, but Raphael was out of sight as well as his furious alpha. Caleb grumbled and sniffed the air, but it didn't help much as the hallway was crowding with hundreds of scents from all the human and supernatural creatures mixed in the air. Torak ran straight to the floor below as her faint scent guided him to the elevator and 5 floors down to the lobby. But Raine wasn't alone because he could trace there were 2 more people with her. It was James and Genedieth. His pulse quickened. He went to the lobby and saw nothing. Torak stopped running and forced through other Lycan's mind who were looking for his mate as a random snippet flew his eyes and their fear for his ferocity streaming down their blood. He saw her. One of his warriors found her. In a matter of seconds, Torak arrived in the parking lot in the BAS E.NT, where he saw 5 of his warriors in their wolf's form made a circle move beside a red car, while 3 of them in their human form were trying to talk to Raine. There, Torak saw his little mate pressed her back into the car, trying to avoid all the Lycans that surrounding her. She was trembling with eyes shut close, and her palm covered her ears. The 3 Lycans in their human form kept singing their reassurance. "Please, we will not hurt you." One of them tried to move closer to her, but then a low growl that seemed could shake and rattle their bone echoed throughout the BAT. All of them moved back in unison. The 5 wolves had their tail between their hind legs. The furious Torak marched toward Raine. He was so angry because she looked terrified. That was a sight that broke his heart. Feeling someone reached out to her and pulled her closer to his embrace. Raine tried to push him back, struggling to get off of him, but Torak simply pressed her head onto her chest. The tingling sensation from their proximity made Raine realize Torak's presence, and his gentle voice traveled to her ears. "It's me," Torak said, rubbing her hair lovingly. "Don't be afraid, my love." The safety feeling that his caress offered made Raine stop struggling. Moreover, she couldn't be possible to push him away as well. Not this time, when Torak determined to bury her in his arms. When Caleb and Raphael caught up with him, Torak had been standing like that, trying every way possible to calm his mate. Only after a few minutes passed, and Raine had calmed, Torak let her off, resting his arm on her waist to keep her close. "What happened?" he snarled, and Raine startled. Frustrated, Torak closed his eyes to calm himself and decided lash out in front of Raine wouldn't be a good idea, so he mind-linked Raphael to question James about what had happened. Let's go back, he said as gently as he could between the raging flames inside him. That's when he saw Raine barefoot. Without considering his surrounding, he lifted her in his arms and marched back toward their room. Alpha! Raphael cut his path before Torak could enter the hotel entrance hall. Someone could create news about this. What he meant, Torak by any meaning, was the famous CEO in the human world. Those people wouldn't understand about this and would make trouble by throwing false rumor around. Then, that would be the last news they made, he said in deep voice while his eyes turned black. He could care less with other people desire to create any rumors they wanted. All he cared now was his mate in his arms, shaking with fear, and he didn't know what triggered her. Raine was fine when he left her. She was sleeping in serene, oblivious with her surrounding, made him so reluctant to leave her alone. She could sleep all day, and Torak wouldn't get boring only by looking at her. However, it wasn't the situation that he imagined when he found her. Raphael followed behind his alpha, who didn't care, with many eyes from the onlookers that blinking rapidly and jaw dropping in disbelief. Some of them recognized Torak as the famous cold-blood CEO, but now he was carrying a girl in his arms protectively. Who was the lucky girl? They couldn't see Raine because her face was hidden in the curve of Torak's shoulder. But her choice of clothes wasn't suit the CEO completely. It almost like Torak just picked her up from run down neighborhood. Many of them secretly snapped a picture of that unimaginable moment with their phone, made evidence if what they were watching now wasn't just an illusion. Raphael had anticipated this before and had made perimeter for their alpha privacy, but he couldn't handle those people's curiosity or order them to close their eyes so they wouldn't see this show of affection. Finally, Torak reached his room, leaving dozens of people who were still gawking in awe behind him. He kicked the door closed and made his way straight to the bathroom. Raine still refused to raise her face from his neck. Actually, her gesture pleased him. This way, he knew at least his mate wasn't too afraid, and he could provide comfort for her. Torak gently placed Raine on the edge of jacuzzi. He was about to stand, but her grip on his neck tightened, prevented him to move away. "We need to clean your feet, my love," he whispered to her ear, and waiting for Raine to loosen her grip. When it didn't happen, Torak gave her a reassuring hug. "I will be here," a tear streaming down her rosy cheek when she heard Torak talk to her so tenderly. It had been a long time since someone talked to her nicely and treasured her like that, not like a delusive madwoman who talked nonsense about illusory creatures. Slowly, she released Torak's neck, kept her head down while staring at her toes. Subtly, she could feel his movement around her, and as he came back in her sight, he was kneeling down in front of her, folding his sleeve, and gently washed the dirt from her feet with bidet shower. Raine jerked away and pulled back her feet from Torak's grasp. She felt uncomfortable looking at him washing her feet. He didn't need to do that, but Torak wanted to indulge his precious mate in the best way possible. He grabbed her ankle to stop her from moving her feet and solemnly washed them. Raine felt the sting of pain when the water cascading her feet. Apparently, she hurt herself when she ran away barefoot. After he had washed clean her feet, Torak took a cream and applied it on them. "Don't move. Wait here for a while," he said as he went to the vanity and washed his hand before he returned to where his mate was waiting. "Look at me," he said, kneeling before her. Patiently, he waited until Raine raised her head and sheepishly looked at him. Not in the eyes. Seemingly, she looked at Torak's ears instead. Absent-mindedly, Torak tucked her hair behind her ears, traced his fingers along her jawline and her rosy cheek. "You are so beautiful, my love." "You are so beautiful, my love." And Torak meant it. Her milky skin contrasted her dark hair like the night sky, as though it complemented her obsidian black eyes. Despite they were sparkling with fear, it didn't diminish her beauty. There was a strange pull that made Torak couldn't withdraw his eyes off of her. It would never be enough for him to see the angel before his eyes. Yes, she was the guardian angel who was betrothed to him by the moon goddess. In his eyes, she was so perfect. He would be gluttonous to ask for more of this perfection. He kissed her knuckled lovingly. "Can I hear your voice, my love?" Torak's question made Raine bit her lips. She dropped her eyes back to her lap where Torak was holding her hands. The spark was there, the warm, tingling feeling that made her feel safe. It had been a long time since the last time she talked. It was like all the words had left her throat, leaving her in silence. "Maybe not today," Torak said after Raine still refused to talk. He reached out his hand to the back of her neck, pulled her closer, wanted to kiss her alluring lips. However, Raine shut her eyes tightly and cowered. A mischievous smile appeared on his lips as he kissed her forehead instead. This bond was ridiculously possessed him. He wanted more. He wanted all of her. But not in her anxiety state now, when every time he touched her, she would shiver involuntarily. "Come, you need to eat." Torak put his hand on her back and under her thigh carefully as he carried her out of the bathroom and put her on the bed while he ordered something for her to eat. After Torak made sure Raine had eaten and slept well, he left her with his gamma, Caleb. He asked Raphael to bring James and Jen to the room next door. He didn't want to leave Raine alone, but he couldn't possibly show her his dangerous side. He almost could feel his beast scratch the edge of his mind, agitated because they had scared his mate. Through the mind link, Torak had heard the reason why Raine ran away from her room, and all of this because of Jen. He clenched his jaw when he entered the bedroom and saw James and Jen had been kneeling on the floor. James looked terrified. He dropped his head so low with his broad shoulder slumped down. Meanwhile, even though Jen was kneeling, but her eyes showed a defiant glint that made Torak wanted to snap her head. It was a form of challenge, and an alpha didn't react well to the challenge. Aside from Torak, Raphael, and the two kneeling people, there were 3 warriors surrounding them. "Alpha Torak, you can't treat me like this." Jen shook her head as her blonde hair swayed around her face. "I should be the Luna if she isn't here. You promised my father," she shouted. In a matter of seconds, Torak held Jen's neck on his hand, raised her a few centimeters from the floor, so her feet hung, losing their footing. He was livid and his wolf was frenzied, kept pushing him to take control. "I never promised anything to your shitty father." Torak growled dangerously low. "He will never get the land or the title of Luna for his useless daughter. Don't ever dream about that." How dare Alpha Xavier shamelessly shoved his daughter and claimed her to be his Luna. He had gone too far for obtaining a land from him. "Alpha, you will kill her," Raphael warned while trying to hold him back. Blood has drawn from Jen's face, and she almost fainted. "Alpha," Raphael called out for him. Only then, Torak released her. Tumbling on the floor, Jen was gasping greedily for air. "Lock her up and let Xavier talk to me if he wants his daughter back," he snapped icily. "Look like he needs me to clear his mind." "No," Jen howled with terrified expression. "You can't do this to me just because you are the Supreme Alpha." "Yes, I'm the Supreme Alpha, and Xavier needs to keep that in his mind." Torak snarled at her disrespect action, demoted him. He nodded at James' direction. "Alpha." James couldn't finish his word when the other warriors who were standing on guard dragged him and Jen out of the room. After they left with sobbing and shouting from Jen, it was only Torak and Raphael. "Alpha, the picture of you and Luna has been on the top search online an hour ago," Raphael informed him. "What your order?" Raphael wasn't sure if Torak wanted to go public with Raine, but since many people had known about her, it was impossible to hide it. However, looking at their Luna current condition, an exposure to her figure wasn't a good idea either. "Some people have started to find out Luna's background," Raphael added. Torak's existence was very mysterious for public, so a little bit news about him would be a hype. Either it was about his business empire or his itinerary schedule. Let alone news about him with a woman The media online was so frenzied about this right now. Talk to Jared. If he refused to take down the article, I will shut his company down. The next day, all the pictures of Torak and Raine had been taken down. However, the discussion online didn't wane. Torak and the mysterious girl were on the lips of many people across the country, and Raphael had been cracking his brain to do everything to lessen the impact. The good thing was Torak didn't pressure him about this matter, so the poor beta could relax for a moment. And by the mention of a moment, it was literally a moment, because early in the morning Alpha Xavier was throwing a fit due to his daughter had been held captive by Torak. He demanded to talk to the Supreme Alpha directly, but Raphael couldn't grant his request for the meantime. Supreme Alpha Torak couldn't meet you at this time. Raphael reiterated his words again and again, but the furious Alpha didn't want to listen to him. If he doesn't want to meet me, then it's fine. He spat. But I want my daughter back. We couldn't release your daughter without Supreme Alpha Torak permission, Raphael said sternly. Alpha Torak will inform you when you can meet him. Alpha Xavier's eyes turned black. His beast was enraged, but didn't falter the beta. He remained stoic as ever. I will meet him now, he roared. The third floor of the hotel had been booked for Torak's beta, Gamma, and his warriors. Since the event yesterday, Torak had given them a clear order that he didn't want any insignificant human or any other creatures except his people were roaming around the floor. Alpha Xavier punched the bottom of the elevator to bring him up, but Raphael held his shoulder firmly. Xavier, I wouldn't push my luck if I were you. Raphael warned him with his guttural voice as his green eyes turned black. Step back. A low growl erupted inside Alpha Xavier's chest. Raphael had been so brash to call his name without his Alpha's title. But, despite his title as an Alpha, Raphael wasn't a trivial figure either. He was the second man of the most ferocious Lycan who had been walking the earth since centuries ago. This fact alone was worth considering. His rage had turned him blind, but if Alpha Xavier pushed it further, it wasn't only he wouldn't get back his daughter, but there was a high chance he would lose his head as well. Harshly, Xavier swatted away Raphael's hand, which held him back from his shoulder, and stormed to the other direction. When the angry Alpha had been out of sight, Caleb approached Raphael leisurely. He had been watching their dispute from the sideline, didn't bother to interfere because he knew the situation was within the beta's grasp. So, don't you curious what our Alpha is doing now? He said jovially with grin etched on his lips when he saw Raphael glared at him. Mind your own business, Cal. He grumbled as his eyes turned to his normal color. The grin on Caleb's lips turned into flirtatious smirked. Well, if I find my mate, I won't like my morning to be interrupted either. He chuckled. You are imagining something too far. Raphael smacked the back of the big pup. Equals 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 equals. Inside the presidential suite, where Torak had been watching his mate sleeping, the sun had risen, but he refused to let the light in. Torak didn't want to wake his mate up, so he let the curtain closed. He had cleared his morning and afternoon schedule. Thus he would like to spend his every second with Raine. Absent-mindedly, he traced her face, twirled her straight black hair between his fingers, and smiled to himself. Last night, when he came back from the meeting, Raine had been sleeping. Hence, she had no idea that he slipped inside the blanket and slept next to her. Probably because of the long trip and the small event that occurred that made Raine exhausted, she didn't wake up at all. Suddenly, Raine's eyes fluttered open, likely because of Torak's touch or his intense stare that stirred her awake. Her long lashes trembled before her eyes opened. She blinked a couple of times and rubbed her sleepiness before she realized Torak's presence beside her. Good morning, my love. Torak greeted her, full of smile. He had long forgotten when the last time he was smiling like this. Raine snapped her head up, and her black obsidian eyes met his blue one. Shocked, her lips were slightly ajar before she sat straight and scrambled away from Torak. However, Torak caught her ankle when she turned her body and pulled Raine back. "Where are you going?" Raine's tiny figure was like a little kitten being dragged away by her prey. She struggled from Torak's grip, but it only amused him to see her hopeless effort. He hugged her from behind, trapping Raine between his strong arms. "I told you don't fear me," he said, barely above a whisper in the crook of her neck, taking liberty to breathe in her scent. It wasn't like Raine dreaded him, but to wake up next to a man who she barely knew still shocked her to the core. After a minute of struggle, and Torak didn't budge, in the end she stilled. His hair tickled her neck, and the hands that wrapped her body only made her feel safe. She didn't know why she felt like that, but she let him hug her. After Torak felt Raine didn't struggle anymore, he raised his head from the comfort of her curve. "Let's have breakfast first, and then buy something beautiful for you to wear. How does that sound?" She was still wearing the same oversized sweatshirt and worn-out ripped jeans from yesterday, and he didn't like this. Raine nodded slowly. Well, she could do. That was an amazing offer to hear. His lips formed a smile. "I'll take a quick bath, and then you can come before we have breakfast, all right?" Raine nodded again. Torak loosened his embrace and gave a small kiss on her neck. The simple kiss made Raine fretted, but she felt butterflies were flying in her stomach. Was it too quick to trust a man that she had only known less than 48 hours ago? Raine confused, but she did trust him. She was silent, but didn't mean Raine was unaware of his intimate actions. Who was this man? Torak got off from the bed and sauntered into the bathroom. The sound of the water could be heard in the next second. The sound was so clear, seemingly Torak let the door open. Raine blushed with this realization. On the bed that seemingly fitted 7 people, Raine examined her feet. The incision from yesterday had healed. She scrambled out from the bed and tested them. The pain was no more, so she took another step toward the curtain and yanked it open. In a flash, she was bathed in the glowing sunlight. Instinctively, Raine turned around from the blinding light and covered her sleepy eyes. When her eyes had adjusted, she opened them slowly. However, something caught her attention and made adrenaline rush in her veins. She was blinking rapidly at the figure right before her eyes. It almost like she didn't believe there was someone else inside the room. But that figure started to talk in a low, eerie voice. "Finally, he found you." He was standing right before Raine's eyes, towering over her body. His tanned skin glimmered under the sunlight. He has curly long hair, which cascading until his shoulder with messy style, and his eyes were the color of golden. They were looking right into Raine's black one. His golden eyes shimmered in delight and infatuation, while the black loose t-shirt and ripped jeans covered his lanky body. He was almost as tall as Torak, but much skinnier than him. The shock and fear crept every inch of her skin. She stepped back when that man moved closer to her, until her back hit the glass sliding door to the balcony. He stopped as well, kept their distance only a few centimeters away. Raine darted her gaze toward the direction of the bathroom. She still could hear the sound of water pattered down on the floor. Torak was oblivious about what was happening as she whimpered silently. "What is it?" He tilted his head curiously. "You can't talk." His voice was barely a whisper while he assessed her. There was no sound coming out from her lips, despite how terrified she was, and tears started pooling on her eyes. Is it possible the purest being is so faint-hearted like this? He mumbled more to himself. Raine felt suffocated by the way he looked at her, as if she was a prey. She looked at the bathroom direction once again when she heard the sound of water from the shower stopped. That man also looked at the same direction as her and clicked his tongue irritably. "It seems he will come now." Again, he talked to himself in lazy tone and resumed his attention toward the terrified girl. Well, this is the fastest way to test it. He contemplated for a while. Next, he pointed his forefinger and touched the exposed skin on her cheek. Raine looked at his skinny finger with his long and sharp nail, was coming closer to her face. Too terrified to look at what he was going to do, she shut her eyes and prepared for the pain or something worse than that. Later on, his nail pierced her cheek as she felt the stinging pain from her wound. However, he pulled back his hand abruptly. The absence of it made Raine open her eyes to see what was going on when she heard that man mumbled absent-mindedly. "It is really you." He looked at his forefinger. The tip of it, which made contact with her skin, was badly charred. Looking at the burn on his finger, Raine relived an unpleasant memory in her mind, but she knew what she has to do. Raising her hand, she wiped her cheek with the back of her hand and looked at the faint blood stain it. Like what she had thought, those creatures who had been hunting her couldn't touch her blood. Something bad would happen to them if they made a direct contact with her blood. After all these years, Raine had learned about it. Hence, with the remaining blood on the back of her hand, she stepped forward and shoved that man away. Out of instinct, he stepped aside before Raine could touch him. He thought the scared girl finally would fight back. However, to his surprise, she dashed toward the bathroom. Interesting. A devilish grin made its way to his lips. Raine didn't look back at the man when she sprinted and barged into the bathroom. Fortunately, Torak didn't close the door, so the moment Raine stepped foot inside the bathroom, she immediately caught a glimpse of his figure behind the glass barrier. Her body moved faster than her mind could work. Within a second, she could smell the woodsy scent that only belonged to him as she pounced on him. Seconds before Raine's body collided with his, Torak turned around with a low growl, ready to battle with the intruder. He was half-shifted with extended claws. However, he froze in place when he saw it was Raine, and the moment she hugged his waist, her scent was all he knew. Torak was flabbergasted for a while before realization registered into his mind. Out of instinct, he wrapped his arms around her trembling body. What happened? Panic was laced in Torak's voice. Something wrong had happened. He sniffed the air and sharpened his hearing, but he caught nothing. He just left for not too long, and all of his warriors have secured the entire floors. What else could threaten her? Torak cupped her face and urged her to look at him. Only then, he saw a wound on her cheek. It's still slightly bleeding. Someone inside the room? Torak tried to keep his voice in calm tone so he wouldn't scare her, but when Raine nodded, Torak's blue eyes darkened. "Stay here," he said with deep voice, but Raine shook her head like a rattle drum. She was too afraid to be alone again. Without any other choice, Torak made her to let go of his waist and hit her behind his back instead as he walked out of the bathroom. His blood was boiling, and it didn't help when the beast inside him also felt on edge. A stranger was inside his room and hurt his mate. He swept his eyes across the room carefully as his body turned rigid. Nothing. There was no one inside the room. The room was empty. He walked toward the window, checked it, but it's still locked. "Caleb." He mind-linked his gamma. "Yes, Alpha. Do you see something suspicious?" "No. Everything is good. Get over here now and ask someone to check the floor." "Yes, Alpha." Torak turned around and hugged Raine, who was still trembling. She buried her face on his bare chest as he stroked her back. "It's all right. It's all right. I am sorry." Torak kept whispering soothing words to her ear. It was the second time within 2 days Raine was frightened. Somehow, he upset to himself. Raine jerked in his arms when there was a sound of the door was being opened. "It's Caleb," Torak informed her. "Alpha, everything is good." Caleb's voice could be heard before his happy-go-lucky figure appeared, yet his light step came to halt. His eyes widened. "Alpha, why are you naked?" Torak wasn't standing stark and naked like what Caleb connoted. He was wearing a towel around his waist. Considering the moment Raine barged into the bathroom was when he just finished shower, he didn't have a chance to put anything on. That didn't mean he objected to her seeing him like this, but it was plain to see that Raine had no realization of what had occurred before Caleb's remark. Yet when the understanding dawned on her, she winced and made a shift to conceal her embarrassment. She stepped back immediately, lowered her head while her long black hair cascading down around her face. She was blushing easily. There was someone inside the room, and that person hurt my Luna. "Scour all the area," Torak commanded. "I will try to ask Raine what she actually saw." He had a trough mind link. The seriousness of the situation and his alpha cold voice, along with his dark eyes, managed to pull Caleb back to the matter at hand. "Yes, Alpha," Caleb said, and in the next second, he was already leaving the bedroom. If it wasn't for Raine's physiological issue, Torak would have been flipped him off with his remark about him being naked in front of his mate and made her uncomfortable. Yesterday's event was an example. The things that happened didn't end well for James and Genevieve. Despite she was a daughter of Alpha and their past relationship, Torak didn't bat an eye when he punished her. That was an extent of his cruel side. After all, his name was feared by many people and creatures in both worlds. Caleb sighed. He tousled his hair in distress. That was a close call. One day his mouth would be the death of him. Grumbling for a few more seconds, then he mind-linked the beta. Inside the bedroom, Raine was still standing in the same position from the moment Caleb rushed out of the room until Torak appeared again in front of her. He was dressed with only black leather pants without shirt. His dark hair tousled in messy waves around his chiseled face. Raine lowered her head again to hide her hammering heart. She had never seen someone as exquisite as him. She knew he was handsome and all, but right now, with the droplets of water run down his jaw and his massive chest was on full display, it gave another impression. Not to mention the way he treated her and how he wrapped his warm hands on both sides of her face, implored her to lift her face. Raine complied with his request. Her eyelashes fluttered like wings of butterfly as her beautiful dark obsidian eyes took his breath away. He could stare into them for a long time and lost in it. His beast started banging his mind, urging him to mark her. But he couldn't do it, at least not yet. Torak brought the distance between them closer, and Raine squealed. Looking away again, her cheeks started blooming with heat. "My love, look at me." She didn't dare to look at him, but after waiting patiently, she did, keeping her eyes on his ears this time. "You don't need to feel embarrassed for what you did or what you see." He let go of his hand from her face and reached out for her little hands, enveloped them in his. "Because everything you see is yours and you're mine. And please do me a favor." Her eyes flickered. Timidly, she looked at him in the eyes as Torak continued. "You should get used to my touch." Torak pressed her hands to his face as he stared at her affectionately. He began to lowering his face and kiss the cut on her cheek. The spark from his kiss made her shivered, but it wasn't something uncomfortable. On the contrary, it was something that made her feel safe. "Now, is there another way for you to tell me who was the person who scared you earlier?" Raine nodded as an answer. Raine timidly looked around her. She tilted her head from side to side, and when she didn't find the thing she was looking for, she started to walk, roaming around the room. Torak followed her a few steps away with bemused expression. However, after some time Raine looked like she couldn't find what she wanted, he approached her and put his hand on the side of her cheek. Raine flinched, still not used with his touch. But the urge to touch her mate was irresistible for Torak. The spark was addicted, and that the first thing his mate should learn, because he wanted her to get used to him and his presence. Ignoring her little attempt to shake his hand from her cheek, Torak asked her gently, "What are you looking for, my love?" He drew a circle on her cheek with his thumb absent-mindedly. Raine tried to tell him by making a hand gesture. Somehow, she forgot her fear and looked at Torak in the eyes, eager to tell him the thing that she needed. In her eagerness, she looked adorable in Torak's eyes. "Look," Raine nodded. "You will draw that person?" Raine nodded again. "All right." Torak strode across the room toward his bag in the middle room, and Raine unconsciously followed behind him. He retrieved a notebook and a pen. "I don't have pencil. Can you do with pen? Or should I ask someone to buy it for you?" Raine shook her head and took the notebook and the pen from Torak's hand. She plopped down on the couch, pulled her knee to her chest, and scribbled something. While Raine was occupied with her drawing, Torak took this time to observe his mate. She was so skinny that he assumed would be underweight. Her skin was so pale, almost translucent, and her lips a little bit chapped. However, beside all of that, she was still beautiful. The beauty that could make him lost for words to describe her. Torak made a mental note to visit a doctor. Raine needed to be examined to make sure she was fine and started her diet to gain more weight. They also needed to meet psychologists. He had Raphael investigated further about her, and the fact she was mute because all the things that she had been through in the mental hospital made him furious. Just what did they do until Raine shut herself? This fact didn't sit right with him. Unintentionally, a low, deep growl erupted from his chest by the image of something terrible that might have happened to her. Hearing the furious growl, Raine's head snapped at Torak's direction. Fear swirled in her eyes. "I am sorry. I didn't mean growl at you." Torak apologized and approached her cautiously, gave her time to know his intention. Raine still looked at him with uneasiness, but didn't move when Torak sat beside her. She bit her lips and lowered her gaze, continue scribbled on the notebook. She took a few minutes more before she finished it and gave the portrait to Torak. There was a faint smile on her lips, and Torak loved that. His eyes beamed, and his beast wagging its tail in delight by her small gesture. However, all of the sense of satisfaction faded away when he saw the portrait of the man who Raine had drawn. Torak's eyes alternated between blue and black as a name hissed through his teeth with so much revulsion. Belphegor. Even Raine could feel the animosity that was carried by the mention of that name in the way Torak said it. She wrote something on her palm, poked Torak's shoulder with her forefinger, and when Torak finally looked at her direction, she raised her hand and showed it to him. Who? Torak didn't immediately answer her question. He looked at her intensely before shook his head. I will tell you later. No wonder he couldn't pick his scent, and sense his presence, as turned out it was him. Raine scribbled something on her palm again and showed it to Torak. What happened? There was concern in her beautiful eyes as her eyebrows wrinkled curiously. However, Torak kept shaking his head. He didn't want to tell her everything yet. It wasn't the right time. Therefore, when Raine was about to write something again on her palm, he grabbed her hands and kissed her knuckles. Actually, you are very talkative, my love. Why don't you talk to me? Torak asked charmingly, peeking from her knuckles. Raine didn't say anything, only staring at her hands, which were clutched by Torak. Kissing her knuckles again, I have someone bring a new dress and underwear for you. It is in the bathroom. After take a bath, you can change into it. He informed her and let her go. With the mention of underwear, Raine blushed furiously and clumsily trudged away from Torak toward the bathroom. This made Torak smile by how blushful his mate. However, when Raine had disappeared into the bathroom, his eyes glazed over as he mind-linked Raphael. Raph, yes, Torak? Stop the hunting. You will never find him. There was a silence before Raphael talked again. Did you know the creature that entered your room? Yes. Belphegor the sloth. Belphegor? Raphael's voice filled with dread. He halted his step and made Caleb almost ran onto him. Belphegor, one of the 7 sins from hell. Beside him, Caleb looked at him curiously. Yes, it was him. But Torak, the war between the lycanthropes and the demons 700 years ago had sealed their power away. Raphael trailed off in his word, and suddenly something clicked in his mind as he blurted out with breathless voice. The prophecy about the guardian angels. Torak stared at the bathroom door with troubled expression when he saw the handle was twisted, ignoring Raphael's awareness about the prophecy. He gave him his firm command. Tell our hunter to start looking for Seraphina. I want to meet her immediately. With that, Torak cut off the mind, link, and left Raphael dumbfounded. Seraphina was the most powerful which had been lost for several decades. Where do I have to find her? Raphael hissed in frustration while running his fingers on his hair. First was the appearance of Belphegor, and now Torak wanted to find Seraphina. It wasn't an easy task. If the prophecy was true, shouldn't Torak send people to find the guardian angel first before he hunted the witch? Suddenly Caleb's face popped in his line of sight. In his shock, he cursed at the gamma. What? What happened? Caleb asked noisily, ignoring all human who was watching them. I need to find James now. James! Caleb tilted his head. Who was he going to hunt? James was their best hunter, and Torak rarely assigned specific tasks for him. But if he did, it would be noteworthy. Seraphina. Raphael answered curtly. However, it was enough to make Caleb's jaw fell in astonishment. Well, at least James will not complain about lack of task now. Then, he realized something important. Do you already know who the intruder? Raphael nodded. Belphegor. With that, he walked away, leaving the petrified Caleb behind him. Equals 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 equals. Inside the presidential suite, Torak just ended the mind link with Raphael when he saw Raine emerge from the bathroom. Her hairs were still damp, and her cheeks flushed with crimson color. As beautiful as she was, Torak frowned the moment he laid his eyes on her. Why don't you wear the dress that I told you, my love? He stood up and approached her. Raine was still in her overlarge sweatshirt and her ripped jeans. Torak didn't like her in that clothes. She deserved all the beautiful things in this world, and he was very glad that he could provide it for her. But why she was wearing those outworn clothes again? In the other side, the endearment in Torak's words never failed to make her heart fluttered. The feeling was so alien, but in the same time was so right. Why are you wearing this again? Torak bent his body, so they were in the same height. Raine was fidgeting when Torak's chiseled face seized all her line of sight as she took a step back. Yet Torak didn't have intention to move away from her. If there was anything, he put more effort to cower Raine's anxious self further. In all honesty, Torak enjoyed this. Finally, when the poor girl couldn't find another way to escape, she was trying to press her back against the wall behind her, as though she wished she could blend with it while her eyes zeroed in her toes. I'm the one here who need your attention, my love, not your toes. Torak feigned sulking. He traced his finger along her jawline and lifted her chin to look at him. I want to see you in that dress. The way Torak said it made Raine's legs almost abandon her and gave away, but she shook her head instead. This rejection made the frown in Torak's face increased. What? For a moment, Raine didn't respond. She was biting her lips with downcast eyes. You don't like the dress? Torak tried to guess her reason, but Raine once again shook her head. The size is not fit. Only then, slowly, Raine folded her sleeve and showed him her arm, embarrassedly. Torak caught her movement and put his attention to the thing that she wanted to show him. However, the moment her sleeves folded up and her arms was on display. His eyes turned red in rage as he roared. Who did this to you? Torak's roar was full with authority and demanded an answer that Raine couldn't find a way to give it to him as her head was racing with the thought of run away from him. He was mad, incensed actually, and she was afraid of his outburst. He wasn't like any other person that she had ever met. No, Raine wasn't even sure if he was a person. Just what kind of creature was him, and what he would do if he was in rage. The man before her eyes reeked of authority and dominance that made her uncomfortable. In spite, it gave her the strange feeling of safety. The feeling of fear came in the same way. Raine tried to wriggle her hand away from Torak's tight grip, but only earned a low growl as a response. He folded up her another sleeves and watched in fury on his eyes when it was the same as her in other arms. The image that was displayed in his eyes was both Raine's hands suffered with small black dots littered on her pale skin. It was marks of how many times they had tried to inject her. The dress that Torak had given to her would reveal all of these ugly scars. There was no way Raine could wear it. 3 years being in a mental hospital left her with rough days, especially when people there knew if she was admitted not because her foster parents wanted to fix her, but they wanted to get rid of her because they had done with her madness and frenzy. When she was scared to death because there was creatures that she didn't know what they were, wanted to take her and killed her, usually she would blow a fuse and screamed like there was no tomorrow until the other creatures left her alone. Somehow, they would run away with pain on their expression that Raine didn't know why, but didn't want to know the reason as well. For those nurses and people in the mental hospital, the easiest way to deal with her was to sedate her. It was always working every time, but the constant injection left her with scars. Some of them weren't scars from the injection, but there was a male nurse who liked to burn her arms with cigarette. The time she turned mute and knew no one would believe her, he started this habit to entertain his boring working hours. He was mentally sick. He enjoyed the pain expression on Raine's face when she couldn't voice a single word of protest when he did that. And no one cared enough to look over her unnecessary extra wound, not even her foster parents. They had never come when Raine was still there in the second years. She didn't have any progress, and her foster parents abandoned her. Torak knew nothing about this. But the moment he laid his eyes on scars that marred her arms, he knew something totally went wrong when she was there. Raphael. His alpha's voice rung on Raphael's head and made the poor Lycan needed to halt his step by the ominous that laced in his voice. Yes, Alpha. Raphael couldn't help but gave him the utmost respect. Find out what had happened to my mate when she was in the mental hospital. I want every record about her treatment there and every single detail about it. Did I make myself clear? Yes, Alpha. And with that the line was cut harshly. Torak mustered every single fiber in his body to subdue his furious beast, his darker desire that demanding blood at that moment. He had been living hundreds of years to master a control over his wolf. He wouldn't let loose now, not when he was with his trembling mate. The goddess of moon was so cruel at him with her way right now. It wasn't salvation for his decaying soul. It was a challenge for his monstrous side. Selene didn't only give him the most physically weak spirit, but the goddess also bestowed trauma into his case. The fear in Raine's eyes broke his rotten soul, and to be aware that he was the one who caused it ripped his heart apart. Ignoring her protest, an attempt to be anywhere except with him now, Torak pulled Raine close to him. He was too strong for Raine to put up a fight. His hand was in her waist while his other hand was on her shoulder, made him imaginably close. He put his head on the curve of her neck, inhaled deeply into her scent, the only thing that could calm him and the only convincing evidence that she was here with him at this very moment. "I'm sorry I scared you," Torak murmured in her neck, hiding his rage and his bloody eyes. He had never been in this state of anguish in these past decades. Being alive for centuries had him immune with trouble and made him less care with his surroundings. However, with Raine was in his arms, and the spark erupted between them along with a warm, tingling feeling engulfed their proximity, had offered all the calm that both of them needed. Unexpectedly, Raine's small hands patted his back as a form of comfort. She was still slightly trembling by Torak's sudden outburst, but she knew that he didn't mean to be mean to her. With that small, endearing gesture, his beast purred with content. His mate was trying to appease him. Her small hand caressed his back soothingly. No matter how comfort he was, Torak still remembered the important task that he needed to do. Reluctantly, he pushed himself away from her, but not before he gave Raine a small kiss on her neck that turned her frozen. Chuckling, he said with lighter mood, "You need to eat." And with that, he ushered both of them out of the bedroom. "My love, I don't want you to wear this clothes again." Torak caressed her cheek that made her lower her head. Raine was still not used to Torak's touch, but the spark between them was indescribable, that made her subconsciously lean her head against his touch. "But because you will not wear the previous dress, how about you wear my shirt instead?" Torak's lips curved into a playful grin. He wanted to see her in his shirt. It would be a sight to look, but only if you want. He added, "Or I will ask someone to bring another dress for you." Raine slowly raised her head and looked at Torak's eyes for a second before she averted her gaze and nodded. She didn't have anything to wear because he didn't let her brought anything from the orphan. However, looking the way he lived, the best clothes that she possessed would look too shabby. Not to mention, she didn't have anything good under her possession. Torak smiled slyly when he took out his shirt. It was a simple white t-shirt and a dark blue overshirt. He also picked up a baseball cap for her. He didn't want his mate being too exposed. "Try these, my love." He handed the two pieces shirts onto her hand. Raine walked to the bathroom once again and changed into Torak's shirts. It didn't take a long time before she walked back with the oversized clothes on. The length of the overshirt's sleeves were a few centimeters longer than the tip of her fingernails that she needed more effort to fold it back while the edge of the hem touched her knees. Raine was still wearing her worn-out jeans, but it was clear to see that the clothes belonged to him. One could say this was another way to claim that she was him, since Torak couldn't mark her yet. With his scent was being all over her, this was enough to ward off any supernatural creatures. They wouldn't dare to mess with what belonged to Torak Donovan, except they were courting death. He didn't want the event with Belphegor earlier repeated. He would deal with the sloth by himself. Torak stared at her, without blinking, as her image right now had turned his ocean blue eyes a few shades darker, while his beast prowled at the edge of his mind. "Come here." Torak waved his hand, asking her to sit next to him. Raine walked closer and sat beside him. Afterward, Torak helped her to fold the sleeves neatly until her wrist before putting the baseball cap and tidied up her hair. The soft strands between his fingers made him hummed and satisfied. He took a longer time to play with her hair before he leaned in and gave a quick kiss on her cheek. "She smells good, like the scent of the soil after rain, so refreshing and pure." Ignoring her surprised reaction, Torak grabbed her hand and helped her stood up. "Let's go." The moment they stepped out from their room, Raphael and Caleb were waiting for them, and along with a few more guards, they were walking to the main lobby where the cars had been waiting for them. Torak rested his hand around her waist protectively when they walked along the corridor hotel, and Raine tried to discern the spark between them. She didn't have this feeling when she touched other people. Raine made a mental note to ask about this later. Equals 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 equals. The clock had struck 8:46 p.m. when they arrived at their room. After the whole day being outside, Raine was spent. She barely could keep her eyes open. Today was the best day in her life after many years of suffering. Torak bought many things for her, all expensive and beautiful. He brought her to art gallery as he thought his mate would like it. And yes, Raine loved it. They spent hours there, just walking along the corridor where many amazing paintings were hung on a wall. Torak walked with her silently. Sometime he would receive a call, and most of the time, he would play with her hair. Raine didn't mind it. Actually, she liked it. When they arrived at their room, Raine took a quick bath after Torak did and was standing in front of a wardrobe. All the clothes that Torak had bought for her had been arranged neatly at the left side, while Torak's was on the right side. Raine looked absently at the dresses inside and frowned. She didn't like the silk pajamas that Torak had bought. Thus, she moved swiftly to Torak's side and found his gray pullover. She put on and paired it with jogging pants. "What are you doing, my love?" A hoarse voice startled Raine from behind and almost made her fell to the floor. She turned around abruptly and looked at Torak, whose eyes had turned black. She gulped hard and reached the iPad that Torak had bought to make it easier for her to communicate. She wrote something on it very fast and showed it to him. "I am sorry, but your clothes look more comfortable. I will change." Upon reading the notes, Torak cleared his throat and said huskily, "No, my love, you don't have to. I like to see you in mine." Raine hugged her iPad close to her chest when she heard Torak's statement as her cheeks turned crimson. She lowered her head and hid it with her hair, which cascading down from both sides of her face. "Let's sleep. We will go to our home early in the morning tomorrow." Torak grabbed her hand and led her back to their oversized bed. The word "our" didn't pass without her noticing. Raine heard it clearly as she frowned. It had been a long time since she called somewhere home. The man, who she knew only for 3 days, have kissed her cheek, hugged her, washed her feet, got furious for her, and gave the feeling of safety that no one had ever done before. This feeling confused her. It felt like she had known him for a long time, as if it was a normal thing to be with him. And also there was this spark, the tingling feeling that hard to reject. With this, Luna remembered the thing that she wanted to ask, but before she could write it down, Torak had sat her on the edge of the bed and lifted her feet before covered her under the warm blanket. He moved swiftly and gracefully, taking her by surprise, but the thing that shocked her most was when Torak got on the bed and slid under the same blanket. She took the iPad from the table beside her and typed, "Are you sleeping here?" Torak propped his left body side with his left elbow, while he tilted his head to read the word. "Of course." He raised his eyebrows with the expression, "The answer is obvious" kind of look. Raine typed again quickly. These past 2 nights, the moment Torak returned from all of his business matter, Raine had been sleeping. So, she didn't have any idea that Torak and her had shared the same bed. "We have shared the same bed from the first day you came, my love." Torak gave her a lopsided smile, with amused int dancing in his eyes. Raine turned the iPad and showed him what she had written. "I will sleep on the sofa." After she had made sure that Torak had read it, she was about to get off from the bed when Torak's hand sneaked around her waist and pulled her back. He cradled her in his arms. His left hand was around her shoulder while the other was holding her down by the waist, chuckling at her futile attempt to escape from his clutch. His beast, and he liked it when he teased their mate. "I will let you go, my love, only if you ask me." He smiled mischievously. "Not with this." Torak snatched the iPad from her hands and looked deeper into her obsidian black eyes. They were the most beautiful eyes that he had ever seen, captivating all of his senses. Raine bit down her lips, wanted to cry in frustration. Torak clearly knew that she couldn't. She wanted to talk, but somehow there was no any sound came out. She strangely lost her voice because of no one believed with what she said she was seeing. There was another living creatures that human didn't aware about their existence, and thought it was only a myth mixed with imagination. But she saw them for these past 8 years, and some of them wanted to kill her. Raine didn't sure what Torak was, but she knew that he was one of them. He had showed her that he meant no harm, but Raine still couldn't say anything. "So, do you want to sleep with me?" Torak asked, trapped her petite body between his strong arms, looking at how she shook her head vigorously. Ignoring the gesture, he shrugged nonchalantly. Silence meant yes. Raine widened her eyes in disbelief. She forgot how afraid she was to look at other people right in their eyes. Out of frustration, she stared at Torak. Her body stiffened when he rested his forehead softly against hers, taking liberty to breath in her scent. Their position was incredibly close till Raine could smell the scent of pine and cedar from him. "Relax, my love. I will not do anything that can hurt you, as it will hurt me as well." The beast that is known to be able to make any supernatural being trembled in fear only by his roar talked so softly to his mate. A pair of arms that could make his enemy perish held her carefully. There was no way Torak would let her to sleep alone, even if by miracle she could talk to him. Moreover, after her encounter with Belphegor, he wouldn't let her out of his sight. Raine let the words sink in her mind, and when Torak kissed her forehead and lay down next to her, she remembered the question that she wanted to ask. With great effort, she reached her iPad again and typed, "What are you?" Realized that his mate would start asking consecutive questions. Torak leaned against the bed head, pulling Raine close to him, and rested his chin atop of her head. "Me? I'm a Lycan. What is that?" With that question, Torak spent the next 30 minutes to explain about lycanthropes and their existence patiently. It was the longest monologue that he had ever done. But he never got tired of speaking when he watched his mate's reaction, especially when he said he could turn into a big wolf. Her lips parted in disbelief, tempted him to seal them with his. After the shock, she typed something quickly. "Can you show me your wolf?" Torak surprised by her request. He lifted her chin and looked at her deeper in the eyes, brushing his thumb against her pale lips with fascination. "Do you really want to see my wolf?" Torak asked huskily. By any means, he didn't want to scare her. Raine was asking to see his wolf was out of his expectation. As far as he knew, and he still didn't know much about her, her fear was one of the reasons why she lost her voice. Those filthy creatures that had been trying to kill her had left her with trauma. But now his mate was actually requesting to see his wolf. Torak hardly could comprehend this, but in spite of that, he was delighted. An award-winning smile appeared on his lips that made Raine look at him in dazed. The way she looked at him was adorable. Torak couldn't help but leaned over to kiss her eyes, and the hitch in her breath made him chuckle by her reaction. "Are you sure?" Torak assured her once again. A faint nod was all she gave to him. Raine has this feeling about him. Something about Torak just simply brought a comfort for her, the feeling of security and being wanted, something that she didn't have for these past 8 years. Every time she looked at his eyes, they were shining with adoration and longing, drew her to look at him longer as she liked the reflection of herself in his eyes. Moreover, she rarely saw Wolf Shifter, and as they always ignored her, Raine didn't have a bad impression about them compared to the other creatures. Despite both of them had sat straight, Raine still needed to lift her head to meet Torak's eyes. "Just remember this. I will not hurt you, okay?" Torak once again kissed her forehead lovingly. This time, Raine didn't refuse or jerk away. She just lowered her head and relished the spark that erupted from the kiss. Torak moved away from her, just to give enough space for him to shift. When Raine raised her head and looked at Torak, his blue ocean eyes gradually darker until it turned black and remained that way. His smile altered as his canine elongated. His body bent forward as fur fought its way out from the follicles. The white fur sprouted all over his body through the t-shirt he was wearing, and in less than a minute that Raine felt like forever to see how stunning the transformation. In front of her, instead of Torak, it was a huge white wolf. By the mint of huge, the wolf was 3 times bigger than her. He almost like the size of a bear. His paws embedded deeply on the soft maroon bed cover, contrasted with his pure white fur color. Raine didn't realize that she had been holding her breath. She couldn't take her eyes from the most beautiful creature that she had seen that presented within her arm reach. The wolf whimpered softly when he saw Raine, didn't give any reaction, and still didn't breathe. He put his snout between his front legs and lowered his body, so his size wouldn't intimidate her. As long as his existence, nothing could scare him, Not even a single creature could make the beast bowed his arrogant head. But in front of his missing soul, he did it willingly, compliantly. He whined once again when Raine still rooted in her position, but he didn't move to approach her, afraid she would be scared. His whine this time snapped Raine out of whatever trance she was in and focused on the soft, worry eyes of the beast. Even in his wolf form, she could tell he was worried and waiting for her reaction. Taking a deep breath, filling her empty lung that lacked of oxygen, Raine ventured herself when she reached out her hand. The wolf looked at her hand and her scrunched face back and forth before he closed his eyes. The moment Raine touched his fur, the wolf purred in delight and nudged her hand, encouraging her to do whatever she wanted. His fur was so soft, the softest things that Raine had ever touched. He was so white without a single stain, like a pure snow. She used both of her hands to stroke his snout, exploring his face, sinking her fingers deeper in his fur. Her sudden adventurousness slightly made the beast shivered. He loved the way she touched him. Slowly and gracefully, he stood on his front legs, made him taller than her. Raine dropped her hand and looked at him. In her eyes, it's not a fear, but curiosity about what he wanted to do. Torak's wolf put his paws forward as he brought himself closer to her. He nudged her nose that coaxed a smile formed on Raine's lips, the first genuine smile from his mate, as she looked more dazzling than ever. He nudged her cheeks once again to make the smile last for a little bit longer, and it did. It almost like she was giggling. Everything looked fine and was in good pace until the wolf caught a presence of something, or rather someone, who was standing a few meters away from the bed. His tender black eyes hardened when he looked over Raine's shoulder as a deep thunderous roar erupted from his chest. Raine abruptly dropped her hands and covered her ears. Torak's roar shattered the tense atmosphere in the empty room, shook the ground beneath them, and sent chill to her spine. The last thing Raine saw was Torak pounced onto her, her eyes open wide before she abruptly closed them. Fear to see the impact that would happen once a creature with weight 20 times heavier than hers smashed her body. However, all she felt was the wolf's soft fur brushed against her arm as ferocious roar ruptured his throat. Raine cowered away from the source of the sound with eyes still closed. She crawled down the bed and hobbled away, didn't really know the direction that she went. She stumbled as she was trying to stand up and looked at her surroundings frantically. At that time, she heard another deafening growls coming from the direction of the other side as the door flew from its hinges, tore, and hit against the wall with frightening sound. Inadvertently, Raine caught a sight of Torak's wolf, and countless big wolves in different color came in her line of sight. The view terrified her as her heart pounding painfully. With sweaty palms, Raine reached the handle of the wardrobe and squeezed her trembling body inside. With both hands that almost lost their strength, she closed the door. Raine buried her head between her knees as she closed her ears, trying hard to put her attention elsewhere except the growling and bone-crushing sounds behind the door. But she didn't have much choice, as the only thing prominent around her was the darkness. Outside, battle between the werewolves and 5 canimas has ended. All of the canimas had been died even before the backup busted down the door. Torak killed those shape-shifters in no time. His eyes were glistening with fury in the color of blood, while those creatures had been shredded into 100 pieces under the white wolf's fangs. Blood trickled down his sharp claws and left traces over his white fur. He looked more feral than ever, mythical creature that had been walking the earth since centuries ago. After everything was over, he shifted back into his human form, but his eyes still bloodshot red, while the rest followed, shifting into their human form one by one. Torak's clothes stained with blood. The color was radiant added with his livid expression. No one dared to talk as they lowered their neck in submissive, too afraid to draw attention of the beast to themselves, including Raphael and Caleb. Meanwhile, Torak tore his clothes and threw it aside as he was sniffing the air. He looked the direction where his mate stayed during the fight. He didn't want Raine to see this side of him, but he couldn't help when he saw 5 canimas were suddenly standing behind his mate with canines elongated, ready to pounce onto her. The thought made him shudder with fear and incensed at the same time. Feeling the anger of their alpha, All of the Lycans backed off a few steps away from him. Torak raised his left hand, as thought he was calling someone or something. A little while later, a burning flame appeared on the tips of his fingers as it landed softly and formed a bird as big as a falcon with majestic plumage that grew brightly like a bonfire. This small creature was the famed firebird. The mystical bird was flying from Torak fingertips and flew above the carcasses on the floor. As the bird floated in the air, it was as if the small bird left dust of fire and burnt the remaining of the Kanama's bodies into ashes. So cruel. A grating voice sounded from the back of the small group of Lycans. In unison, more than 10 heads directed their alerted eyes toward the source of the voice. It appeared there was a young man with golden eyes and long curled hair that reached his shoulder, had been standing in front of the large wardrobe behind them. However, no one realized his presence until he talked. They tried to sniff the air, but their scents picked nothing. This man has no scent. Torak stepped forward and growled deeper as his claws extended. He walked without hesitation toward him. "You better stay right where you are," he drawled. His eyes were glimmered brightly. Or he reached out the handle of the wardrobe and was about to open the door when the mystical bird swooped in his direction very fast. Despite the incredible speed of the bird, he dodged it easily. However, in the next second, Torak had wrapped his slender fingers on his neck. "Belphegor," Torak called him. "Don't you dare to come near her." Torak's voice was deep and deadly calm, but it laced with threat and warning. Despite being threatened and the fact Torak squeezed his neck in tight grip, a taunting smile graced his lips. It was only natural for Moth to approach the fire, he said with trace of ridicule before Torak strangled him. His eyes rolled back on his socket before his body burst into ashes. Every Lycans in the room were holding their breath as the identity of the man threw in the open. Belphegor, the prince from hell, the 7 deadly sins. Among the crowd, Caleb couldn't help but whispered to Raphael beside him. "Is he died?" "No." Raphael shook his head and gestured to the warrior to clean up the mess. "He is not even alive to begin." The mystical bird flew above Torak's head and disappeared like a smoke while the owner was looking at the wardrobe where his mate hid herself with troubled expression. His eyebrows locked together. When he felt the movement behind him deceased and everyone present had gone, Torak reached out the handle of the wardrobe and opened it slowly. He didn't want to scare his mate than she already was. Inside, Raine curled her body. She hugged her legs tightly and buried her head between her knees. She shivered in fear, and this made the furrow between Torak's brows deeper. "My love." He called her softly and reached out his hand to touch her. However, when Torak caressed her head, Raine jerked away. 10 minutes ago, she looked happy to see his wolf, and that made him happy. No, he was ecstatic to know Raine wasn't afraid of his wolf. She even touched and smiled at him. Everything seemed right at that moment, even though it was only a slight change, but she was starting to warm up with him. However, those filthy creatures had ruined their moment. "Raph." "Yes, Alpha. We leave tonight." Torak didn't wait for his beta to answer before he cut the link. He had the most important things to do right now. Gritted his teeth, he reached out his hands, grabbed her body, and pulled Raine into his arms. Hugged her tightly, but not tight enough to hurt her. As expected, his mate struggled to get free from him. Her arms were flailing helplessly as she tried to kick him. Her breathing escalated as she was panic. However, Torak kept hugging her while caressing her back in soothing motion. "It's me, my love," he whispered into her ear. "It's fine now, no one will hurt you. I am here." He kept repeating that words again and again until Raine's attempts to hit him ceased down and she just trembling in his arms. "It's all right." He chanted the words while rocking her back and forth. Eventually, Raine felt the familiar feeling and scent surrounded her. The spark that erupted all over her body has stronger effect than sedative that would have been injected on her the moment she lost her sane like this years ago. After minutes passed in coaxing and whispering, finally all left from Raine was sniffle and choke breathing. In the other hand, Torak didn't let her go yet before he was sure that his mate could sense his presence and totally fine. Raine raised her head and peered at Torak through her wet lashes. Torak couldn't help but kissed away her tears. "You are safe, my love. I will not let anyone, not even myself, to hurt you." It was hurt him to see her like this. "Do you trust me, my love?" Raine stared into Torak's eyes, and it took his breath away by looking into those beautiful eyes. He wanted to stare at her forever. Unexpectedly, Raine wrapped her arms around his neck and buried her face on the curve of his shoulder. She was nodding faintly. "Are you all right? Can we go now?" Torak smoothed her disheveled hair and picked her up by holding her tight while Raine latched onto him, as if she was an oversized koala. Raine didn't know where Torak would bring her. The only thing that she knew now was this stranger made her feel safe, and, as strange as it sounded, she trusted him. Thus, once again she nodded. Torak snatched a black jacket and brown sweater before he put Raine down on the sofa. He wore the brown sweater with remarkable speed and helped Raine to put the black jacket on. The big-sized jacket drawn her small body, and with baseball cap on top of her head, no one would recognize her. When Raine lifted her head to look at him, his figure blurred, but in the next second he was crouching down in front of her while lifting her feet to put her shoes on. Feeling uneasy with what he was doing, Raine leaned forward with intention to tie her own shoes, but Torak had caught her hands before she could touch her feet and kissed them softly. "Let me do it," he said indulgently and lifted the other feet. After he was done to take care of her shoes, Torak buttoned up the black jacket and pulled out her hair while saying, "We will go home." However, when Torak was holding Raine's hand while walking toward the door, suddenly Raphael's mind linked him. "Torak, we can't leave now." "What is it?"